So this week's episode of Flight Chat is a little bit deceptive on the surface because yes, there definitely is reaction to the Supergirl first teaser trailer. But there's 4 individuals that have sent in emails today. It's the tricky part though, is that one of them sent about 7 emails. And the other is Anthony Dorsey. Yes, Anthony Dorsey sent an email. So between John R., who sent about 7 or 8 emails, and Anthony Dorsey, this could be a long episode in itself. And then we've got a couple of other listeners, Alex and Jared as well, to get to their feedback. So not that many people, but could be a lot to say for this particular week. So without further ado, let's kick it off. Starting, of course, with John Rosler, the first of his about 7 emails. This first one he sent on December 9th. It's called Capitalism's a Bitch, Ain't It? Why did you take the I? We don't have virgin ears here, John. It's okay. You could have kept that I in there. That word is acceptable on cable, so it's acceptable here on this show. All right, here we go. So he says, Saturday, December 6th, a happy accident day. Before my questions, I must share an experience that happened to me last weekend, he says. A friend of mine invites me to go to a Godzilla exhibit in Japantown, San Francisco. There's a Godzilla exhibit there? All right, have to remember that. I parked 20 minutes away because parking in San Francisco is an existential nightmare, but at least I got some steps in. This is why I'm really glad we relied on BART and Muni, the mass transit system, which I thought was really awesome when we were in San Francisco. But anyway, he says, my friend texts me telling me he saw lines in the East Mall in Japantown for Dragon Ball voice actors, including Sean Schemmel, the most famous English voice actor of Son Goku. I did this emoji when he told me as I was walking to Japan upon seeing this revelation town, the shocked emoji, that's what it looks like. When I finally met up with my buddy, he wanted lunch, but before we went, I had requested he show me where the Dragon Ball voice actors were. I thought this was an interesting thing because usually voice actors do these types of things at fan conventions, he says. I mean, sure, there was a time when an autograph and photo ops were things in malls, but it's rare nowadays. Admission fee was only $5 and a pic and an autograph each was $40. I had to do it when I was going to get another chance. When was I going to get another chance to do this, he says, especially since my con attendances have been more sporadic for me these last few years. My friend wasn't that huge Dragon Ball fan, he says, so he went to the exhibit without me. I had actually met one of the 3 voice actors, Sonny Strait, prior and even became friends with him on Facebook. I would have said hi to him, but the line was a 2-hour wait and didn't have a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of time. I did get to make a funny reference, he says, to the show, to the 3rd voice actor, Damian Mills, who voiced recurring Dragon Ball villain Lord Frieza. These names sound vaguely familiar. Gotcha. He says, I did something really dumb and I regretted it immediately. The couple in front of me were talking to Sean and I tried to tape a little of the convo. It sounded interesting, but when he asked if I was recording, I nonchalantly said no and deleted it. They had strict rules about that, and I was worried they would kick me out of line. So he was fun to talk to. It really is amazing how enthusiastic he was when fans ask questions, even if he's already heard them a million times. I mean, I guess when life gave you this opportunity to voice someone so iconic, it gives you a type of humbling that stays with you, whether it be Tom Kenny as SpongeBob, Mel Blanc in the Looney Tunes, Kevin Conroy as Batman, you name it, he says. I expressed how much I've been wanting to meet him for 25 years, but his con appearances in Northern California, for one reason or another, never aligned with my schedule. You got to keep in mind, Ray, he says, prior to 2014, going to conventions for me involved either driving 2 hours to Sacramento or 2 hours to San Jose, and I didn't have my own car. So I had to hope a friend was going, and if they were, I had to either spend the entire weekend there or borrow my dad's car if I just wanted to do one day only. But hey, the dude appreciated I got to come at all. Not gonna lie, I was sad I didn't have the Dragon Ball shirt on, as I had plenty of Goku shirts too I could have worn. But he did point out plenty of others that weren't wearing Dragon Ball items either. He had a good point. I did tell him how I got a cool Goku shirt when I visited Mexico. I actually got 2 from 2 separate trips to Mexico, but I lost one, but I ordered a similar one online. I did mention, he says, I didn't know this was happening today, as I was going to do a Godzilla exhibit originally, which Mr. Schemmel didn't know was happening, and I suggested maybe he check it out if he had time. But man, was it a delight to finally meet the guy who played my favorite character in all of fiction. The only regret was I didn't buy an 8x10 for him to sign, as it was another $40. I'm very picky of what photos I want signed too, and I already spent $40 to get a picture with the guy. I'm sure if you had to choose one, autograph or photo, I'm assuming you go with photo. You're correct. No, you're not wrong. You're correct. I prioritize photos more than autographs, mainly because I like to verify that I did in fact meet them. Exactly. That's 100% why I choose it as well. I had to ask a friend or family, he says, to take a selfie to sneak a picture with Jason Mewes, Sylvester McCoy, Charles Martinet, angry video game nerd James Rolfe in the background. Sometimes even someone getting a pic of me shaking someone's hand is just as good as a photo op. Absolutely. Still great experience, he says. The downside was the exhibit closed when I was done, but I am going to try to go see the Godzilla exhibit next Saturday, maybe drive some Lyft passengers early in the day to recoup my money spent. I was not expecting to have to spend $70 that day. I joked with my friend that I'm glad I found a free parking spot, and he was such a good buddy, he even drove me back to my car. Attached to a couple of pics, I wonder if you were ever in a position to choose between pic or autograph. No, not specifically. I mean, there are famous people that I have met before in my line of work, but that was never a choice. That was always going to be a picture. Wouldn't want them first because of where I was being at work, asking them to sign something just doesn't seem right. But taking a picture seems perfectly right because everybody takes pictures and everybody has a phone, right? Everybody's got camera phones, so picture ops, like photo ops, are always like the best opportunity. It doesn't feel like I don't think I was ever in that choice between pick or autograph in that regard because I have not had that choice yet at a con. So, but that's cool. Cool story. Glad you had that experience. Let me know how the Godzilla exhibit is when you actually do get a chance to go. All right, now on to his questions for this first email. Number one, he says it really does feel like a no-win situation at this point when it comes to who buys Warner Brothers. Is there a company right now who could try to outbid Skydance, Paramount, or Netflix at this stage? Comcast is out. Disney's still trying to recoup buying Fox. Amazon, Apple, or Sony seem like the only true companies that have the funds to do it. You say the best case scenario is nobody buys them. But is there a company out there that can buy them that's the second best case scenario? Not really. And the reason I say that is because the reason that the best case scenario, John, is that nobody buys them is because we want to avoid monopolization. And any of those companies that you listed, Apple, Amazon, or Sony, would just be more monopolization. We really do not want any more studios buying other studios at all. We really don't want that. We want competition. The fact that Fox is owned by Disney is still not a good thing, right? That Fox should still remain separate. They really should, but they didn't. And now Warner Brothers is about to fall under the same fate. They will not remain separate. Corporate greed is fueling all of this. So no, there is no second option that would be better than either Paramount or Netflix at this stage. The number one option is still the best option, rather, that is not going to happen is still for Warner Brothers to remain solvent on its own. But again, that's not going to happen. But yeah, Amazon, Apple, or Sony buying them, no. None of those options would be better than Warner Brothers. And none of them would be a second better option either because monopolization would still occur. Now, I will say that if we're being like technical about it, do I think that theaters would be under attack with Amazon, Apple, or Sony? No, I do not. I don't know how much they would like prioritize theaters or how much they would prioritize physical, but I don't think that they would try to eliminate them like Netflix is in that regard. So I guess by default, if you consider those second best case scenario, sure, but that's really just, it's kind of splitting hairs at that point because again, the monopolization is the bad thing ultimately. He says, my pick is Amazon, but that ain't happening. No, it is not. I do think there is one person that's out that's worse to own Warner Brothers than the Ellisons who can afford it. Musk. He says, note, I am aware something could drastically change between now and the next flight chat. Now, that's not happening. I don't think Elon Musk is going to do that, truthfully. And that's, I mean, if you're talking about worse people, well, yes, obviously Elon Musk is a vastly worse person in that regard. But yeah, I think we just need to maintain perspective. It's going to be either Paramount or Netflix, one of those two, and that's in the hand. Those are the two options in the hands of the shareholders, and we should find out relatively soon which one they're going to stick with, and we'll see how everything plays out from there. Number two, he says, going forward, I will try to do better not to be disappointed if a flight chat episode doesn't happen. Have I ever done anything to make you mad? If I did, I apologize. Not really. Sometimes like my schedule, like, trying to like get everything arranged, like sometimes things will pop up. And maybe, I'm not able to get an episode out at a timely fashion, but it's like, okay, maybe a little bit later I get it out there. So I guess really it's just patience. I mean, that's really it. But I can't say it's one of those where it's like, damn it, John, will you just shut up? No, I can't say I've ever like been put in that particular position, to be honest with you. And I mean, I don't think it's anything to really worry about in that regard. I mean, it is what it is. We're all human. We all have our moments. It's fine. No, I wouldn't. I don't feel that you're good. You're good, buddy. It's all good. No worries about that. Number three, I'm glad to have rejoined your Patreon for a bit. Your flight speed episodes are a delight to listen to. I used the Black Friday discount to become a Patreon for the month. I also discovered I don't have to commit to monthly subscription to get your content. I actually went and bought some episodes individually, especially if it's Snyderverse related. Is that cool with you? Yeah, that's a new option. I didn't realize that the last couple of times, last couple of updates to Patreon, yes, you can like sell individualized episodes of content, and I've started doing that. I've started making that option available for people that just want to hear a particular episode, like maybe they don't want to hear all of the reviews or all the flight speeds or whatever. And yeah, I've only sold like two of those. I think you bought one, and someone else bought. I think it was either my Psycho review or my Birds review. One of those from Flight Fright back during Halloween. I'm pretty sure that was Sam Otten. I could be wrong, but I'm not certain. But either way, yeah, those are the only two that I've sold. But yes, I'm going to keep that option open for people that just want to get individualized episodes. It is entirely up to you. I will not put any pressure on anybody as far as how they wish to enjoy the content. Number four, he says, so I admit I've never owned 4K Blu-ray before because I don't know what platforms they're accessible on. I know PS5 plays them, but would I need a 4K TV for it to work? No, you don't. I don't have a 4K TV, and they work fine for me. At least I don't think I have. No, I don't think I do. He says, I get confused a lot by this. I don't have a PS5. Tammy's brother does, and if I were to live with them, it would just be temporary to borrow. So buying 4K Blu-ray would seem rather silly unless I gifted the movie to him. But then again, you own 4Ks that you haven't even watched yet. Do you know how many you own and know how many you haven't watched? Also, best recommendation to watch 4K on. One last thing, context of my current job situation. Actually, I'll get to that here shortly. Let me answer your 4K question first. I 4K is my first option for purchase. Like damn near everything I have, I'd say 75 to 80, maybe even more than that of my collection is 4K. And in most cases, it's a 4K and a Blu-ray option. So even if I didn't have a 4K player, which I do, because Xbox Series X plays 4K, I would still have a Blu-ray option as well. But yeah, I don't think I have a 4K TV. I don't think I do, and I don't think that's necessary. I really don't. I think it comes down to HDMI and whatnot. I mean, if you're trying to get like full experience, which I'm not at that point yet with home entertainment, because for me, I want the movie in 4K because it's the best quality, but I also, haven't done all of the due diligence yet to upgrade all of my other stuff quite to 4K level, which I'm fine with that. Like I'm really not that much of a stickler about it yet, but I will be. As far as how many movies I have that I haven't watched, I would say the majority of them are the Criterion movies. Like the vast majority of my Criterion collection I have not watched yet. As far as the steelbooks and everything else, I would still say there's maybe a quarter, maybe 25 to 30% of my collection that are blind buys, but most of them are not. I mean, the anime stuff that I bought, the Studio Ghibli movies that I have, and some of the other anime stuff that I've got, yeah, those are all blind buys, but that's the majority of it. A lot of the other stuff that I've got, there's not nearly as many blind buys in the majority of my collection outside of the Criterion section that I have, right? Even some of the bigger steelbook sets that I have, like for example, I have the Mad Max set, which has the first four Mad Max movies, Mad Max, Road Warrior, Beyond Thunderdome, and Fury Road. Only ones out of those that I haven't like seen all the way through. I've seen Road Warrior bits and pieces, and I've seen Thunderdome bits and pieces. I've seen all the first Mad Max, and I've seen all the Fury Road. So that probably is the most like blind buy as far as those. And then like I have the Resident Evil steelbook set. I've only not seen the last one, the sixth one. I've seen the other five. Or like Jurassic World, I have the Jurassic World set that goes from the first film up to Dominion, and I've only not seen Dominion. I've seen Fallen Kingdom once, and I need to rewatch it. I've seen the other four multiple times. So that's where we're at with respect to that. I don't have quite as many blind buys over the course of the entirety of the collection. Again, most of my Criterion stuff is blind buys, but I don't have quite as many blind buys in that regard. But I buy 4K first and foremost because I'm thinking ahead for any up conversion, and 4K still work on what I have. I've got a 4K player for that. So then getting to what he said one last thing, context of my current job situation. Right now, I work two part-time jobs that allow me to work my own hours. I work as a backup job coach for neurodivergent people who are trying to gain independent employment in Napa County. So some periods I may get extensive work. Other times I cannot have any work work to do for days, even weeks. My other job is rideshare and delivery, Uber Lyft, Uber Eats, DoorDash. Having two jobs with select hours might not be the most ideal situation to live by, especially in California, but it's been very helpful when it comes to my mental health. Ever since my engagement ended 15 months ago, I've developed depression. I have to take medication every day. If I don't, well, missing more than one day was a contributing factor. I've had embarrassing public meltdowns, some that embarrassed Laura. I had a panic attack because I didn't have a hat or sunglasses to wear on a sunny day, as I had a fear of burning my eyes blind. I remember my first big nervous breakdown was the bad reviews of Batman v Superman, and the struggles I'd been dealing with was the catalyst to finally start taking medication. My father was very anti-pharmaceutical medication and believed marijuana fixes everything. He indoctrinated me into thinking the same thing for the longest time, he says. Honestly, I probably should have started taking medication for my anxiety and existential thoughts when I was 12, but 26 is better late than never, I guess. But also, working my own hours has given me peace and tranquility. Being on the open road, taking people to their place of destination is an adventure. I think it's cool that your work hours are shortened during the holidays. I don't know if it affects your bank account depending on PTO and UTO, unpaid time off. Must make Shonda and other loved ones happy you have time to spend with them. Well, it's PTO. Like, I take PTO, like, in my job. Like, that's, and it's literally, I'm in use it or lose it territory at the end of the year, where if I don't use it by December 31st, then I lose it for the year before the clock gets reset, and I don't want to do that. So that's why I've been taking paid time off. I don't use unpaid time off. Absolutely not. No, it's all paid time off. There's no such thing as unpaid time off for me. I work otherwise, right? He says, I used to spend time with my dad a lot when we lived closer. I feel bad that I don't do it as much, especially during the periods where I lived in another state and didn't see him at all, but I try to see him at least 3 times a month. I remember when I worked as an alarm dispatcher in Florida, I requested to work in Texas so I can celebrate my birthday with my dad, who flew from California. It was the first time in like 18 years we did a trip like that together. I don't even think we had ever spent time in a different state, just the two of us outside California or New York. I know this was a bit of a stream of consciousness to response to my current employment status, but I wanted to explain the bigger picture of how work life has impacted me. Hope you got fun Christmas plans. You're very generous to not celebrate your birthday on an actual Christmas day. Funny thing is, even though most of my family celebrated Hanukkah growing up, we also did the tree and gifts largely because my mom's side of her family growing up. When my grandparents divorced and married Christian folks, it didn't seem that weird to celebrate both. Safe travels in the snow. I'm doing a snow trip for New Year's with Tam. I kind of envy you grew up in snow, but you did say it gets really cold, so maybe growing up around it has more disadvantages than benefits. It's all a matter of perspective. Right now, it is 13 degrees outside. It was colder earlier. It was. It was like it was single digits all this past weekend, and it was awful. It was terrible. Did not like it at all. But it is what it is. And there are plenty of people up here that love the cold and love the winter and like go up north on a regular basis every year. And that's just a thing for them. But you know, with respect to work schedules and everything, man, everybody's perspective is different, and it's all about protecting your peace. If you know how your body works, if you know how your mind works, then you have to make decisions based on that, right? Because work-life balance should never be a case where you sacrifice your life and your own own personal beliefs and your own personal health for work. You should never do that. Should never do. No one should ever do that. Whatever they tell you, whatever indoctrination any of us have had, nobody should sacrifice their own personal health and their life and their quality of life for their job. That should never happen. So whatever you got to do, whatever situation works for you in order to maintain your personal health, your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, that's what you got to do. And if that's what your current situation is affording you, then so be it. There's no shame in that whatsoever. You got to do what you got to do. Protect your peace. That's what I tell everybody. Protect your peace, no matter what. So I'm with you on that one. Let's see. So that was all of his first email. So now let's get to his second email, which is, Flight Chat breaking news. Intriguing. What breaking news is he talking about? He says Oasis in talks to score the next Bond film. Oh, I did not hear about this. I am vaguely familiar with Oasis. Now, he provided the link to the Facebook story on this. Is it still active? Let's see. It's taking forever. Here we go. This is from Britpop News. I don't know how viable this source is, but it says multiple outlets are reporting that Oasis have been tapped by Amazon MGM to write and record the next James Bond song. This past August, it was announced that screenwriter Stephen Knight from Peaky Blinders will be writing the next film, and that Denis Villeneuve from Dune is set to direct. An insider on the matter told The Sun the 007 films are one of the greatest British franchises, and who better to record the theme song than one of the greatest ever British bands. All right. Hey, you know what? Cool. I am still behind. I still haven't seen No Time to Die, even though I know, like, not exactly how the movie ends, but I know the thing that happens at the end, because that's just hard to keep in spoiler territory. But John posting this says, oh my God, please let this be true. Oh, and I have one more thing. I have a dirty joke. Uh, I don't know what do you do? What do you to elephants? Is that what that is? Or what do you call two elephants having sex? Junk in the trunk? If it's too graphic, you can omit from the show. Is that really graphic? Junk in the trunk? Uh, nah, it's fine. It's all right. It's whatever. It is what it is. I feel like that joke would be okay on cable TV. He's also got a bonus pic of him and his friend Spence leaving Japantown trying to be like Gene Simmons. Yeah, he's got the Gene Simmons look. Okay, cool. All right, so that was the second email, flight chat breaking news. All right, here we go. This third email that he sent, this is one that he prefaced me with, and we talked a little bit about this, actually a decent amount about this on Threads. This email is titled, "This is what I think will happen depending on who owns Warner Brothers." He says, so I'm not going to focus on the negative. I'm going to focus on the positive aspects. He says, if Netflix is the true buyer, so I know you keep using Man of Tomorrow as your example of what Netflix might do. I know we argued about this, but I think you're right in the sense this will be the model for most of their movies. However, I don't think they'll do it for DC movies. Here's why. One, Gunn and Safran will step down from DC Studios. You do that, the goodwill the DC brand has been building back up will be gone. Two, validation. You're right, Netflix doesn't need billion-dollar movies, but they will probably want at least DC to be the one to do it for validation, notoriety, and that it can be just as viable as anything Disney puts out. They would do it for the rep, not the actual dollar gross. Three, new subscribers. I don't know if you literally mean Man of Tomorrow or the Batman Part 2 will do the limited release, but guess what? 200 limited screens for a week would mean less opportunities of new subscribers. I guess they could keep international box office the same with wide releases and just use this model domestically. However, this would be ironic due to the fact that DC can average the same as Marvel in North America, as they aren't as strong overseas, so I don't see why they'd shrink in their market because they, quote, don't need the money. 4, SAG will never approve of this, Screen Actors Guild. There's people in Hollywood trying to block the merger as is. If they accept the outcome, there will be pushback from actors, writers, directors, and producers, and this will lead to a strike. 5, Netflix has experimented with theatrical windows before. A year or so ago, Netflix started doing Netflix Home, a theatrical in limited markets to see if they can make more money with their streaming originals. So at the very least, they're not as anti-theatrical as they appear to be. Another positive, he says, is we'll have more streaming options. That's at least one other positive. And I'm sure I can find other examples, but this guy I talked to, he seems to know a lot about the industry and believes DC movies will be safe, and a small number of blockbuster movies are safe from the limited release window, but yeah, everything else could get the limited to streaming treatment. As for physical media, he says, yes, this will become a thing of the past. Even with Paramount, it would just delay the inevitable. It just means I got to get the Steelbook 4K of the Superman movie sooner than later. The positives for Paramount, he says, meh. Other than preserving wide releases in physical media, not much. Also, I don't know if they'll keep Warner Brothers as an entity with this acquisition. The Ellisons say they are, but you can't trust rich people. If a merger plan for either falls through, maybe a dark horse buyer can come out of nowhere. And then bonus, I managed to get a Christmas tree on the 9th. It was available outside of a Safeway. I used a 20% off coupon to drop it from $54 to $33.21 off. Cool tree. Looks good next to the menorah. Did you and Shauna get a tree yet? We've had a tree. We've had a tree for the last number of years, and yes, it is deployed. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Yep. Right next to the menorah. That's cool. I like the different colors of lighting. Okay. So, John, we talked a lot about this the other day on Threads, but I'm going to reiterate it here. Let's go through each of your points because I could probably set fire to all of them. Not trying to be mean, but just I really feel like there is a perspective that all of us need to understand and get away from the hopium of what will happen if Netflix does end up owning all these. So let's to your first point, where you say Gunn and Safran will step down from DC Studios. No, they won't. No, they won't. Well, why would they? Because here's the problem, John. for James Gunn and Peter Safran to step away from DC Studios, it means that they would have found a better offer elsewhere. And since Netflix would literally own the rights to DC, they can't resume. This would be the Zack Snyder problem all over again. The people that want him, that wanted him to do Snyder, that still want him to do Snyderverse, you can't do it without the rights to the DC characters. So Gunn and Safran would literally be walking away from their 10-year plan if they don't agree with what their bosses are doing. I don't think they do that because they still have lives and they still want to be successful and they are in charge of the DC IP. And it's not like Netflix isn't going to pay them for their job. They most certainly are. They're still going to be able to make their films. They're still going to be able to make their shows. It's just going to be under the Netflix paradigm. So I do not agree whatsoever that Gunn and Safran will step down from DC Studios if and when Netflix decides to eliminate theatrical and physical media. The second part, validation. There's no such thing. Like you're saying, like Netflix does not need billion-dollar movies, but this idea that they want DC to be the one to do it for validation, for what? What validation do they need for that at all? The only validation they have or need are subscribers. There's no need. Theatrical representation, theatrical box office doesn't provide them any validation at all. They don't give a shit about that. They don't care. There is no symbolism for them to be validated by what a movie makes in the box office. In fact, the only people that do take validation in box office is scoreboard mentality, and that's producers and that's people at Forbes and anybody that's into the box office valuations. What value does that really hold? Especially when we consider the box office is not a measure of quality, it's a measure of popularity in that regard. And nobody can tell Netflix they're not popular. If they weren't, they wouldn't have over 300 million subscribers. So no, there is no validation whatsoever. There is no rep for them to be gained whatsoever by releasing a movie theatrically. They do not give a shit about releasing movies theatrically for any type of reputation or validation at all. All right, so then new subscribers. Now, this was the part that I was really talking to you about on Threads, because you're suggesting that a limited release, like 200 limited screens for a week, would mean less opportunities of new subscribers. I don't understand your logic on that at all, because here's the deal. If you even do a limited release, like 200 limited screens, how does that mean less opportunity and new subscribers at all? You're looking at movies as an opportunity to drive people to the app. And while I understand the hopium that you have in believing that, the reality of the situation is that if somebody out there in the general audience has an opportunity to watch a DC film like Man of Tomorrow or The Batman Part 2, because that comes out next year as well, or in 2027 rather, right? Or that's 2027, not next year, because next year's schedule is not going to be affected by this at all. The regulatory stuff is going to take longer than next year, right? So if somebody watches Man of Tomorrow or The Batman Part 2 in theaters, right? They watch it however many times they can in theaters on a wide release, and then they buy the movie on VOD. That means they never need to pay money for a Netflix subscription whatsoever. They never even need to type in Netflix in their search engine to look for the website. Netflix doesn't want that. What Netflix does want is to take DC movies, hold them hostage on the Netflix app, and then force people who want to watch them to subscribe to Netflix. And all it takes is a 16-digit credit card number that the general audience will give them, forget about it very quickly because they're busy watching Man of Tomorrow or The Batman Part 2 however many times they want. And the algorithm's going to point them in the direction of, hey, if you like that, then there's this and there's that. And then that person is now indoctrinated into the Netflix family and have completely forgotten that they gave their credit card number to them a month earlier, and it's just charging and charging and charging every month. That's what I'm getting at here. Like, theatrical presentation, wide release is not an opportunity to get new subscribers. Subscribing to the app is. And pointing them towards the app and basically telling everybody, hey, if you want to watch the Superman sequel or the Batman Part 2, you got to subscribe to Netflix, which they will, and then game over. That's the draw, not theatrical. You're not using theaters to push people to Netflix. That's not how this works. It's not how this works at all. Netflix, Ted Sarandos, and I sent you the link to this, John, earlier this year, not last year, not a couple years ago, earlier this year, Ted Sarandos at Netflix called theaters outdated. Here, let's go ahead and grab his actual quote from this piece that I sent you the link to. This is a Variety article from April of this year, April 24th, 2025, written by Ethan Schanfeld, titled, Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos says movie theater model is outdated. Most of the country cannot walk to a multiplex. That's the headline. And it says Ted Sarandos' latest interview started with a softball question. Have you destroyed Hollywood? No, we're saving Hollywood, the Netflix co-CEO said with a smile. On Wednesday in New York, Sarandos engaged in a brief discussion with Time magazine editor-in-chief Sam Jacobs at the Time 100 Summit. The two jumped right into the problems plaguing Hollywood and why Netflix is succeeding amidst production decreases, dwindling box office numbers, and an industry in contraction. He says Netflix is a very consumer-focused company, Sarando says. We really do care that we deliver the program to you in a way you want to watch it. Using the struggling global box office as an example, Sarandos added, what does that say? What is the consumer trying to tell us? That they'd like to watch movies at home, thank you. The studios and the theaters are duking it out over trying to preserve this 45-day window that is completely out of step with the consumer experience of just loving a movie. It says Netflix is not entirely removed from the movie theater business, as the company owns Los Angeles' Bay Theater and New York's Paris Theater, which Sarando says Netflix saved from becoming a Walgreens. We didn't save it to save the theater business. We saved it to save the theater experience, he says. Netflix must also give limited theatrical releases to films seeking awards qualifications, such as 2022's Knives Out sequel Glass Onion and 2024's Emilia Perez. Remember, this article is back in April. Quote, we have these bespoke releases. We have to do some qualification for the Oscars, Sarando said. They have to run for a little bit. It helps with the press cycle a little bit, but I've tried to encourage every director we work with to focus on the consumer, focus on the fans, make a movie that they love, and they will reward you. Sarandos also noted that, quote, we're in a period of transition, saying folks grew up thinking, I want to make movies on a gigantic screen and have strangers watch them and to have them play in the theater for 2 months and people cry in sold out shows. It's an outdated concept. That's his words, John, not mine. This is all his words. Asked specifically if the desire of filmmakers wanting to make movies for movie theaters for the communal experience is an outmoded idea, Sarandos said, quote, I think it is. For most people, not for everybody. If you're fortunate to live enough in Manhattan and you can walk to a multiplex and see a movie, that's fantastic. Most of the country cannot, end quote. Sarandos insisted that he loves movie theaters, but of course their decline does not bother him. Instead, he said he would be bothered if, quote, people stop making great movies. He warned Hollywood not to get trapped behind wanting audiences to see movies in theaters because that's how the film industry wants audiences to watch them. Instead, for the sake of the entertainment business, Hollywood should adapt to the way in which audiences want to watch movies, Sarandos argued. There you have it, John. Seriously, I didn't give you conjecture. I didn't tell you what I think Sarandos is saying. I gave you actual quotes. I gave you what he said. He called it outdated. He says that people can't afford to walk to movie theaters. He made it seem like a class issue and that they're treating no movie theaters as an affordability aspect for the consumer. What makes you think this man even remotely gives two droplets of shit about putting a DC movie out in theaters? No. Absolutely not. That's his biggest IP, and he wants people to be at home watching his biggest IP at home. Get ready for Man of Tomorrow in select theaters and on Netflix a week later. Get ready for The Batman Part 2 in select theaters and on Netflix a week later. I'm sorry. Seriously, like this isn't even just about they don't need the money, because they don't need the money. But this is about he fundamentally believes that theaters are not in our best interest. He believes that theaters are not for us. He believes that Hollywood is trying to force people into going to the theater and that the audience is telling us that they don't want to go to the theater, right? And that's literally the fundamental belief of the co-CEO of Netflix, right? This is where we're at, John. This is more than a business model. This is an ideal. This is a belief system that they have. So you really, after everything I just read to you, John, you really still think that DC movies are safe from not having wide release in theaters. You really believe that after what I just read from you, after what I just read that he said directly. Again, this is not conjecture. This is not speculation. I gave you quotes. I gave you what Ted Sarandos actually said about movie theaters being outdated and about how we are saying as an audience that we can't afford to see them. He's citing that. And that was earlier this year. So you want me to believe that he, in the last 6 to 8 months, has changed his mind on that, and that's why he's trying to buy Warner Brothers, because he believes that theatrical is important now? No, certainly not. Absolutely not. So no, they're not looking at it that way, John. And I think everything that I just read also refutes your fifth point with respect to them experimenting with theatrical windows. No, I mean, I hear what you're saying about doing Netflix at home, but again, limited markets, like, he wants to preserve the experience. That means he's okay with it becoming niche, but that doesn't mean wide release. That means, okay, Alamo Drafthouse can stay. That means these smaller chains can stay, and they're gonna, you can go to their Paris theater, you can go to their New York theater, but that's it. It doesn't mean that wide release is going to be available across the country anymore. They don't want that. Okay, so that's the theatrical window that we're talking about in that regard. So your only option, like number 4 about SAG not approving of it, okay. Like, I could see the Screen Actors Guild and I could see the Directors Guild and the Producers Guild. I could see them pushing back on this, but how far is that going to go? Because is it a case where they're going to push it so far that they're all just going to pick it and not go back to work until theatrical release is preserved? Are they going to put Netflix in the same position that they put the other studios in? That might work. And I say might only because what the other owners, like the studio owners a year ago with their strike, they were coming at it from a position of arrogance and they were still beholden to the theatrical model. Netflix isn't. Netflix is afloat without the theatrical model. And there are more than enough scabs, like, all across the country, all across the planet, right? They have more than enough content. Like, I don't know how much Netflix would be hurting by the strike, right? Was Netflix in a bad position with the strike last year? I don't know what their numbers were. Their subscriber numbers seem to have grown in that regard, right? So I don't know how much the strike hurts them at this point in time. I really don't. I don't know how far the actors guilds and the other guilds are willing to push a strike like that, truthfully. I mean, I guess we have to wait and see if it comes to that. But, also from Netflix's perspective, I mean, would it be something that they would gradually do, or would it be something they do immediately? I feel like it would be a gradual thing in that regard. But that's the ultimate point here, is that they're looking to eliminate them, whereas Paramount is not going to. Paramount is still beholden to the theatrical model, and they're still beholden to the physical media model. I don't agree when you say, even with Paramount, it would just delay the inevitable. No, Paramount is still going to sell, because again, the old school thinking, right? The only app out there, the only streaming app out there that is completely independent or is operated completely independently of physical media and theaters is Netflix. Everybody else still has more than enough connections and more than enough through lines into physical media and theatrical presentation, right? So no, physical media is not going to go with Paramount. It's not. It's definitively not going to, because they're still going to want to sell discs to us in that regard. Netflix doesn't feel the need to, because they're 100% into streaming. I don't think that's the case with Paramount whatsoever. I think Paramount is going to go, hey, we want the streaming audience and we want the streaming library, but we're still going to sell you discs for those of you that want to make money on that, because they've made money on it in the past, right? They're not anti-physical release in that regard, not like Netflix is. And I know there's this idea that, because they're a streamer, they're eventually going to become that way, but no, not at all. Your only hope is the unions, right? Your point number 4, and even then, like I said, I don't know how far that's going to go. I really don't. That will be an interesting thing to observe if it gets to that point. But yeah, I'm sorry, John. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here, but this is why I've told everybody, for people that don't understand that why Netflix is the worst case scenario in this regard. Like, here, I'll put it also this way. Any of the political changes and whatnot that you all are deathly afraid that Paramount will make to CNN and to Warner Brothers and whatnot, those changes are easily reversible with, the next person in office, or the second that the advertisers and other people that spend dollars to advertise and sponsor and stuff with Paramount, the second the money dries up, that's when their position reverses. Okay, so, and that's easy, right? It may not seem easy to you, but it's real easy. I mean, as easy as as political stuff is being flipped one way, it can be flipped another way pretty quickly if they feel like they're losing money. And make no mistake, if shareholders start losing money, they will get loud. They will make it very clear to David Ellison and everybody else involved, hey, this isn't working. You better change your philosophy in that regard. And they will. They will, because at the end of the day, they want to make money. Regardless of what you think their message is, regardless of what you think they want to do with all their consolidation, they will follow the almighty dollar no matter what. Whereas in Netflix's case, once you close movie theaters, they're gone. Movie theaters don't come back. They don't resurface. They don't resurge. They didn't resurge out of the 2020 with the pandemic. They're not going to resurge now. So there's more of a finality to Netflix's decisions than there is to Paramount's decisions. Paramount's decisions can be changed on the surface, fundamentally within how the company operates. Getting rid of movie theaters cannot be. Getting rid of physical media production cannot be. Once you kill it, it's dead. it's over. So that again is why I maintain my position that Netflix is the worst case scenario by far between them and Paramount. And again, your only hope, John, your only hope is the unions. And we'll see how far they go because, quite honestly, I feel like Netflix has far more of a leg to stand on with the actors and the other guilds than any of the studios did last year with respect to the AI protections and stuff and whatnot. But we'll see. We will see. Okay? So, as far as I'm concerned, the positives for Paramount still remain. Theatrical and physical media will remain in that regard because they're traditionals in that. So, yeah, those are my thoughts with respect to that. All right. We're now through, 3 of John's emails? Here's his 4th email. Now, this one is Supergirl trailer thoughts. This isn't a long one. He said, looks like a fun movie. I like that it didn't show too much. Only one single shot of Lobo in silhouette, which makes me want to see more. I wasn't too happy about Crypto pissing on Superman in the newspaper, but it just emphasizes that he's an out-of-control dog. Exactly. And let's be honest here. Anybody out there that is making that big of a stink about Crypto pissing on the newspaper is looking for a reason to bitch. They're looking for a reason to complain. They're looking for a reason to be out of sorts and up in arms, for the sake of it. It's performative as far as I'm concerned because, they're unhappy with Gunn or they're unhappy with the direction of the movie or they don't like that it's a female lead. Whatever misogynistic bullshit reason there is, they're looking for a reason to complain because it's really not that big of a deal. We see that type of joke in movies all the damn time. And this is no different in that regard. Crypto is out of control. Absolutely out of control. We know this, having watched the Superman movie, and that was him being out of control with a calming influence like Superman. Imagine how out of control he will be with the bad influence of Kara, his actual owner, who lets him do that shit. And that's really what it's supposed to symbolize, that she doesn't give a shit. She's just happy that he pissed on the paper as opposed to anywhere else in that hovel that she was living at. So that's how I would look at it, truthfully. All right, so after that, John has got a couple of other emails here. He said this one was optional. A thank you to John Cena. Let's see, this is a Facebook post. He says, the worst case scenario happened. I would have rather have him pass out and retire, never giving up, to give Gunther a humbling. Instead, he did what most of the internet predicted would happen, and now Gunther has boosted his ego even further. Hopefully the next top star Cena figure gets that torch next defeating the ring general. Still a good match. I hated the finish, and I don't blame the crowd for booing Paul/Triple H. Having said that, I'm going through a lot of emotions right now. It's the end of a chapter, and I look forward to seeing his future endeavors. I was a 14-year-old kid, and my first introduction was when he began his feud with Carlito. He was the first public figure I ever met with my mom and brother along for the ride. I know he's become an internet meme, but I've always respected John Cena. I always have, and I always will. Hashtag thank you, Cena. He says, my hero has hung up his sneakers and jorts, and I'm an emotional wreck. So, clearly, John is a huge John Cena fan. I can't say that I'm not a WWE person, don't get into the wrestling thing, but I could see that. I know that that's a emotional thing for a lot of wrestling fans. So I hear you. I tell you what, I condolences, I guess. I don't know. I'd offer thoughts, prayers, whatever, however, I don't know whatever consolation you need, John. I hear you. As far as your hero hanging it up and no longer being part of the wrestling scene, which I'm guessing that's what this is. Yeah, that's what he said. To give context, Cena tapped out in his retire match, and he never taps out, I see. So he is officially retiring. Okay. All right. Well, that is that with respect to that. And this other link to Facebook, I guess that content got removed either way. But there you have it. So that is actually it for John's emails this particular week. So he's bummed out over John Cena retiring from wrestling. I get it. I understand it as best as I can get it and understand in that regard. Thank you, as always, for the feedback, John. Greatly appreciated. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens with respect to the future of Warner Brothers, which we should know what the shareholders are deciding here within the next week or so as well. All right, now let's go to Anthony Dorsey, who has presented us another massive email missive. This one's called Flight Chat number 5, because there is always a wrong to your right, and there will always be a war somewhere to fight. And God knows I've had some rough effing years. Oh Lord, keep on keeping on. Yes. Foxy Shazam, the theme song from season 2 of Peacemaker, which I actually like better than Do You Want to Taste It. I actually do like that Foxy Shazam song a lot better, personally. That is my thoughts on that. But all right. So that is our introduction to Mr. Dorsey's email, his first in a little while. He says, hello there, Ray. I'm back again after a lengthy hiatus with another massive email missive. I don't have a ton to talk about. Edit, this was a bald-faced lie, and I should have known better. As I haven't had much time to watch stuff now that I'm working. Edit, I clearly watch more since I wrote this intro, lol. Despite being part-time, he says the hours are all over the place and I'm usually closing until 10:30 or 11 p.m. It's not my favorite job ever, but also not my least favorite. Turns out I just like having a routine and tangible tasks to accomplish each day. Management is good, and most of my coworkers are nice and cool. Some have attitude problems, but I'm sure that's true of every job. One guy was so negative and would curse at people, me, but not just me, for not doing things the way he does them that are contrary to how the manager taught me, and even got written up for harassment in the past. He's now transferred to another store, and everyone is much calmer, and we often comment on how much better it is now. Never be someone who causes others to breathe a sigh of relief when you're gone. How do you deal with people like that at work or elsewhere? Have you ever worked with people like that? Yes, I have, and a lot of them, really, you just give them enough rope for them to metaphorically hang themselves, and they will eventually find themselves fired and or transferred elsewhere, generally speaking, right? Like that's usually, in my experience, that's usually how that works out, from what I have seen. So that's what I would say with respect to that. He says, now on to some shows, movies, games, and books I've watched, read, or listened to since last time. All right, let's start off. Training Day, 2001. Oh, okay. Spoiler. Yeah, I've seen it. I own this film, so we're good. He says, finally watched this classic starring Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke and was so surprised by it as it wasn't at all what I expected. Great tension throughout as Denzel's character puts his partner and the audience on edge for the whole movie, and yet it was still surprising when the reveal happened and he showed his true colors and betrayed Hawke. I totally understood why this movie stands the test of time as both leads gave career-defining performances, rating 9 out of 10. Yes. Yes, indeed. Denzel winning the Oscar for it as well. Very strong film. Completely agree with that. Next up, The Roses, 2025. No spoilers. Ah, yes. This remake starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Olivia Colman was very funny, he says. Clever and well acted, as the slow build-up of their marital problems continues to be funny and engaging to watch throughout. Parts of the plot make it easy to remember it's an old story, e.g., the idea that, isn't it funny now that the wife is successful and the husband has to raise the kids? Crazy, right? Yeah, that sounds like Mr. Mom. Totally. He says, but everything is modernized with fresh ideas so as not to make it feel stale or old-fashioned. Well, I like Mr. Mom. If they did a Mr. Mom remake, I'd be okay with that. He says the supporting cast featuring the likes of Andy Samberg, Kate McKinnon, and Ncuti Gatwa was strong as always. And I felt like everyone in the movie was a scene stealer, especially McKinnon. Despite a bit of a slow pace and in spite of its 105-minute runtime, I definitely recommend this one, rating 8 out of 10. All right. So far so good as far as ratings. Star Wars The High Republic, Tales of Light and Life. No spoilers, he says. All right. A well-varied anthology book, he says, with various tales written by most of the authors who spearheaded the High Republic era, spanning from before the start of Phase 2, the prequel phase, to after the events of the Fallen Star, which ended Phase 1. The enjoyment of each story will likely come down to which of the author's styles clicks with you the most. For me, my favorite stories were in chronological order: A Closed Fist Has No Claws by Tessa Gratton, which I felt was the most necessary story for High Republic readers as it was a much-needed bridge between Phase 2 and 1. All Jedi Walk Their Own Path by Charles Soule, and The Call of Coruscant by Lydia Kang. All the short stories in this book felt very unique and interesting, especially if you read all the previous novels and know the involved characters, though some of the stories featured new characters that weren't in any previous material. Like most anthologies, some stories were great, some were good, some were okay, and a couple I didn't particularly care for, he says. With this book finished now, I can finally start Phase 3, which is already wrapped up at the time of the writing of this review, but even that's still a ways away in my to-be-read stack, rating 8 out of 10. All right, thank you for that. Wasn't even aware that phases were a thing with Star Wars. Moving on. Batman Volume 2, The Batman of Gotham by Chip Zdarsky, Jorge Jimenez et al. Spoilers. I haven't read this, but all right, let's see how this goes. He says, well, I've read more than a few comics since last writing in. I wanted to highlight this arc as I found it quite unique in terms of Batman stories. Without getting into the setup too much from the previous arc, Batman is once again presumed dead, but in reality he was sent elsewhere into the multiverse. In this new version of Gotham, Bruce finds himself without his utility belt in a world where Bruce Wayne never became Batman and instead donated all his money and became a social worker. That Bruce is dead. In this world, a rich and sane Joker has taken over and given many known villains a Venom-powered upgrade and sent them out to root out what they deem the insane with extreme prejudice. Harvey Dent in particular seems like a combo of the Punisher and a Lockup from Batman the Animated Series. Throughout this story, Bruce works with a young orphan girl and this world's Alfred to defeat Darwin Halliday, aka the sane Joker I mentioned, in his quest to become like his insane counterparts. This storyline was especially interesting to me as it fought against the idea that Batman creates his villains and would be better off donating his money. It shows how even a sane Joker is still evil and his villains would still be who they are without his involvement. It also showed that he is more than his money, and his villains would still be who they are without his involvement. It also showed that he is more than his money, being able to put together a patchwork Batman suit and striking fear into the criminals of this world, including a Clark Kent that was driven insane. He says the arc ends with a multiverse-spanning chase as Batman chases Halliday from world to world, meeting a variety of Batman and Jokers, including Batman Beyond, Michael Keaton, Adam West, Arkham Gameverse, Dark Knight Returns, and others. While the cameos themselves were dope, the message of the story was great as it showed the endless struggle between Batman and Joker, and that things wouldn't improve if Batman killed him, and perfectly showed the tireless will Batman has, and that he always helps those in need, even if the one that needs help is another Batman. I also like that he ended up with a suit inspired by The Dark Knight Returns, but with a 66 belt complete with shark repellent. Great arc. I'm loving Zdarsky's Batman so far. Rating 10 out of 10. All right. And since you laced that with spoilers, Anthony, I will do my best not to remember a single word you just said. Hopefully I won't. But all right. Glad you enjoyed it. Continuing on. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, the book, not the movie coming out, obviously, because we haven't seen that yet. But no spoilers for this one. Anthony says, after seeing the trailer for the upcoming Ryan Gosling movie by the same name and seeing the reaction from fans of the book who said the trailer spoiled too much, I decided to finally check out the audiobook, which had been sitting in my Audible library for a while. Narrated by Darkseid himself, Ray Porter, the basic premise of Project Hail Mary is that a man wakes up without his memory on a spaceship in a distant galaxy and must figure out who he is and why he's there. The story is told through parallel storylines, with the present being him on the spaceship and the other being through chronological flashbacks leading up to what put him on the ship. After finishing the story, I don't think the trailer gave too much away, but it does include scenes from throughout the book and not just the first half, so make of that what you will. Very quickly into the audiobook, it was easy to see why Ryan Gosling was cast in the lead role, and there honestly couldn't have been a better casting. Though it will be tough to beat the excellent first-person narration by the ruler of Apocalypse. Great book that will teach you some science, give some good laughs, and show that you can find a deep connection anywhere to anyone or anything. Rating 10 out of 10. Yeah, I heard people say that there's a massive twist that the trailer gives away. Not necessarily the book itself, but a twist in the book that apparently is so amazing if you don't know what it is. But I think many of us already know what it is after having seen that trailer. But either way, I'm sure, or at least I hope, that the movie itself has other twists and turns that we won't see coming with respect to the story that we will enjoy as well. All right, but he liked the book. He dug the book. And cool, good deal. Marvel Zombies 2025. No spoilers yet, thank you, because I have not watched this yet. He says, following the trend of Marvel dumping a long-finished project at once with little advertising, it continues with Marvel Zombies. Much of this miniseries reminds fans what almost was, with a major focus on recently introduced characters teaming up, and it gives an idea of what the original plan of Kang Dynasty could have been, or even a possible Young Avengers movie. The effective protagonist of Marvel Zombies is Kamala Khan, with other important roles filled by Shang-Chi, Kate Bishop, Blade as Moon Knight, Riri Williams, Yelena, and Red Guardian, among others. All that I mentioned are played by their on-screen actor, except Blade, who is clearly modeled after Mahershala Ali, but is played by Todd Williams, who interestingly also took over a role in Invincible that Ali played in the first season of that show. Yeah, I'm behind on that. This show is a spin-off of What If, and continues off of the Zombies episode from Season 1, though there might be some continuity issues, I don't know. I didn't rewatch that episode, he says. But if you have yet to watch What If, I think it would work perfectly to watch this show right after that episode. This series ups the ante in terms of violence and gore due to the TVMA rating, though it's certainly not the most violent anti-superhero show. That's Invincible. But considering it's the MCU, they did go further than I expected, he says, even giving some family-friendly characters getting gnarly kills or getting gnarly killed. This show did some very cool stuff using the existing MCU continuity from the past few phases that again gives a glimpse of what a non-nostalgia-filled Avengers movie could have looked like next year, building on what they've been setting up since 2021. Overall, Marvel Zombies told a unique, fun, violent, and very interesting story in only 4 episodes, he says, but unfortunately it ends in a similar way to Ironheart. Ironic since she's also in this show, But unlike Ironheart, there are rumors of a season 2, so if that happens, then I think it'll end up as an excellent story through possibly 8 episodes. Rating 8 out of 10. I also want to mention, he says, that Marvel Rivals is currently doing a zombies event inspired by this show, and it's a lot of fun and also very challenging. All right, well, that's still on the list, and yeah, we'll see how it goes when I finally get to dive into that one. But I definitely do need to watch What If first, at least that Marvel Zombies episode, before diving into that. All right, moving on. Here we go. Oh, video game time. Death Stranding 2019. No spoilers. He says, in my free time, since before I got this new job, I've been slowly playing through this game by auteur video game director Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear Solid franchise. It is simply a game that only he could come up with, he says. Death Stranding is essentially split between gameplay, where you deliver packages across gorgeous landscapes and story scenes with the most insane things you've ever seen. There are nihilistic terrorists, enemies who are addicted to stealing packages, and also ghost people and animals made with black goo with umbilical cords that your special baby BB can detect. The story and characters have such overt subtext that it's more than even the text. The characters all have on-the-nose and often silly names, but every one of them has a simple or complex meaning that gets revealed later. For example, most of the people you deliver to are named in a way that you can keep track of where they're stationed, such as Jake Wind, who is at the Wind Farm, or Owen Southwick, who is at South Knot City. The main cast members have names like Dead Man, Heartman, Fragile, Mama, and Die Hard Man are being introduced, and to them in the early game, it can be hard to keep track of who they are, especially with some having similar titles. But when you interact with them and meet them more often, finding out each of their name meanings, added a lot of the connections you make to them. This is written like really like I appreciate like all the writing, Anthony, but this is like the spacing is making it really difficult because you've written whole paragraphs, and sometimes it's real easy to lose my place. Do I have to zoom in? I think I might have to zoom in here real quickly. Let me see. View, zoom in. Yeah, I'm starting to feel old now because I've actually got to zoom in, and hopefully that will help me. Now I've lost my damn place. Where the hell was I? Okay, here we go. It says, honestly, that is what the game is about, connections. This unintentionally would have been the perfect COVID-era game, but it released just before then, and I'm playing it now, so I don't get that experience either, he says. The game stars a protagonist who has a phobia of touching others, and it's all about meeting new people, helping them out, and connecting America together after a catastrophic event. You can figure this theme out very quickly in the game, but seeing it play out, especially in the late game, was very rewarding and emotional. The late game consists mostly of TV episode-length cutscenes after what you think is the final boss. The cast of the game is also wild and shows how Kojima just picks people he's a fan of, making it an eclectic video game. I think there should have been a comma there. Just picks people he's a fan of, making it an eclectic video game cast consisting of actors like Norman Reedus, Lea Seydoux, Troy Baker, Margaret Qualley, Tommy Earl Jenkins, Nicholas Winding Refn, Mads Mikkelsen, and with a special appearance by Guillermo del Toro. That's what it says for his credit. And yet he's got a crazy amount of screen time and possibly the most dialogue in the game. Also, Conan O'Brien has a cameo. Death Stranding is a weird, emotional, beautiful, confusing, touching, well-acted, and compelling slow burn of a game. Not for everyone, especially with it taking me 140 hours to get the Platinum Trophy. One thing I hope for the second game is for more of the deliveries and side quests to feel more story-driven than just taking things from point A to B. Rating 8.5 out of 10. That seems a little low given how effusive you were of the show or of the game itself, but hey, it's still a B plus, right? 85% is a B plus. So yeah, all right, fair enough. I've heard of Death Stranding, but obviously I've never played it. But yeah, cool deal. Next up, Peacemaker Season 2 spoilers. Yep, so I've seen this one. Wow, this is a long paragraph. He says, the much anticipated second season and third project released from the DCU wrapped up with incredibly high anticipation going into it. In the end, I thought the season was pretty good, he says, but not great, and also overhyped. A few episodes in, I clocked that this season was much more focused on character development than it was superhero action or cameos, like some people wanted and expected. And I dealt with the rest of the season seeing people online set themselves up for disappointment based on James Gunn saying the finale was the most fun he had making something, and to expect Superman connections. Well, that's partially his fault, Anthony, if we're being fair about it. The show had plenty of Superman connections without him actually showing up, and I was happy enough with the Lex Luthor cameo, he says, which impacted the show and set stuff up for the future. Is that not all we want from cameos, or do we prefer cameos for the sake of doing the Leo pointing meme? The latter, Anthony. Come on, Anthony. Seriously, you know it's the latter. And again, if people are going to be upset about it, I can't blame people for being upset about it. But to me, it's just a lesson learned. It's the Last Jedi lesson learned. That's where I'm at with that, to be very honest with you. If people are still bitching about it now, that's their business. I'm not going to let it derail my perception of the DCU going forward, but it was underwhelming, and I'm not going to totally put it on the fans' expectations. Part of it is James Gunn's fault. I don't know if that contradicts anything I've said in the past, but that's how I feel about it now. He says, similarly, after the show slowly got Oh Lord stuck in my head for months, I quite enjoyed the band's cameo and thought it fit very well with the show. I didn't need it. It was kind of boring to me, personally. All that said, I think character development only goes so far and led to a season full of shortened episodes with an overall very simple story, he says. When it's all said and done, that writing about it now a while later, I feel like there's not too much to say about it, especially after how quickly people guessed the big reveal of Earth X, and then how quickly they totally left behind that world. I did like the bit about how Ads and Judo Master noticed that Nazi Earth isn't much different than regular Earth, and felt the concept of making it similar to the real world but with no people of color was brilliant, and makes the show much more relevant than if they made it a war-ridden hellhole like the CW Crisis on Earth X, which I'm not bad-mouthing, he says. They were going for something totally different than this show, and it was a very different in-real-life landscape than it is today. That is also true. I think what Gunn was going for with this season was well executed, but I don't like how it ends with a cliffhanger that he's implied will be picked up in another show or movie, which disappoints me, as I feel like that's where Marvel lost touch by not doing multi-season shows and having shows end with teases for movies rather than a season 2. I think you're making a rather big assumption on that one, but okay. He says, also popular to the popular complaint at the time, despite no Superman-level cameo, the season clearly set up big things for the DCU. People are only disappointed because Gunn is a bigger nerd than most of us and set up a story inspired by a comic that many, including me, have never heard of. Kudos to him for the deep cut. Yeah, but by the same token, just because he's a huge nerd like that, Anthony, that doesn't mean that we can expect everybody else to be those huge nerds. Nor does it mean that we can tell them that they're wrong for feeling disappointed, because they're not. They're not wrong for feeling that way. And also, with respect to it ending with a cliffhanger that he's implied will be picked up in another show or movie, so what? What is the big deal with that? Is that going to, like, adversely affect, like, Supergirl or Man of Tomorrow or Clayface? No. Those movies are still going to occur, so I'm not entirely certain what you mean about losing touch like the MCU did in that regard. I don't quite get your angle on that. He says, since the conversation around the show has passed, I don't want to belabor the point, but I thought the season was well done for the most part, but just didn't have the juice of season 1, which had great superhero action while also having wild dialogue and great character development. Lastly, I'm old enough to remember you and Brent dunking on Legends of Tomorrow for barely having Firestorm or the Atom suit up and use their abilities, but I feel like any given season of that show blows this away in terms of how little Peacemaker wears his iconic outfit, only in the Justice Gang audition, and how much action he does in either that or his Earth X outfit. None, as far as I remember, rating 8 out of 10. Yeah, but I think that's apples and oranges because Peacemaker doesn't have abilities. Peacemaker doesn't have superpowers. So it's not the same argument at all. Firestorm, that was a case where, like, Martin and Jax, like, had abilities and they just, for budgetary reasons, never showed it. That's totally different. Knowing that you have a character with superpowers and knowing what the superpowers are, and then actively choosing for budgetary reasons or otherwise not to show them, as opposed to doing the character work with Peacemaker, whether he's wearing the costume or not, totally different story, totally different subject matter, totally different setting as far as I'm concerned. So I don't I don't think it's quite the same thing in that regard, truthfully. Are we halfway through his email? I don't think we are. All right. Slow Horses Season 5, no spoilers. Since you haven't watched this show, he says, I'll just say that this was yet another engaging, funny, thrilling, and perfectly paced 6-episode season of TV. Oh, so 6 episodes is okay for Apple, but it's not necessarily okay for DC and the other shows? I don't know if you were saying that, Anthony, or others have said that. I know that that's a discussion we've all had in terms of season lengths. So 6 is okay for Slow Horses. All right. I wonder why that is. He says the political aspect this season, dealing with an election in the background with mass shootings and bomb threats involved, added some relevance, especially with the politics of one of the candidates. I miss the 2 cast members who've left the show this season for different reasons, though one is in the premiere, and felt their missing presence in how it affected the other characters. This season was more plot-driven than last season, but next season seems to be more character-driven, and that's exciting. Rating 9 out of 10. Slow Horses is on my list. of eventually maybe I'll watch it because it's on the list to watch. But so is this next show, Gen V Season 2, Light Spoilers. Oh, Lord, here we go. He says, after a first season I enjoyed more than most seasons of The Boys, I felt this season missed the mark slightly by being more like The Boys than the first season. The super school impact of the show, the super school aspect rather of the show, is mostly lost this season in favor of another cast on the run / in hiding, similar to how the boys team consistently are underground. The driving mystery of the season is honestly not that mysterious, and I feel like the writers were surprised by how quickly people guessed the reveals, as they were quickly banking on the reveals being shocking. I also felt a certain switcher didn't work super well and reminded me of what happened in the first Fantastic Beasts movie, which I also haven't seen. Of course, a big factor for some of the issues this season was the shocking real-life death of Chance Perdomo, who was one of the leads of the show, he says. His loss is felt through the characters, and he left a gaping hole in the show itself. They reworked the story and put his father in place for what was clearly going to be his storyline, but it doesn't hit the same. Having a grieving parent fill the role of a college student in a group consisting of other college students. I don't blame them for this, though, as this was the best case scenario for reworking the season without a massive delay and a total rewrite or a quick recast, which, similar to what happened with Chadwick Boseman, wouldn't have been what the rest of the cast and crew would have wanted, and I respect that, and how they worked in his character's death was their way of respecting both him and the character. Still, he says, I love the core cast of Gen V and find them much more sympathetic and relatable than most of the characters on The Boys, and that carries a lot of the weight of this show, considering the other issues I had with it. I don't know what to expect if they do a third season after the final season of The Boys, but I have high expectations for it, considering it shouldn't require last-minute rewrites like this season. 7.5 out of 10. All right. Moving on from that one, because Gen V is definitely on my list. Only Murders in the Building Season 5. No spoilers. Another season of cozy fun with the great trio of Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez, he says. This season had a few really good episodes and great moments throughout, but it was also less engaging and thrilling than the past seasons. I'm starting to feel like this show has lost the sauce that made it so good in the first place and peaked back in Season 3. Enjoyable enough, but I think the show is nearing the end of its shelf life, rating 7 out of 10. Well, that is certainly a subjective phrase, and we'll see how much the audience agrees with you or not going forward. I don't know. That show's on my list as well, but there's too much shit to watch. Moving on. Predator Badlands. Light spoilers. I saw this movie, so you can go ahead with that one. He says, I'm not super well versed in this franchise. I didn't know they were called Yautja until this movie. I knew it, but I had read it somewhere. I forgot that it had never been made canon in the franchise. Having seen the original, he says, some of two, The Predator and Prey. So you've seen the majority of the Predator franchise. You saw the original, some of the second film, The Predator and Prey. So the only movie that you haven't seen any of up until this one is Predators. Okay? He says, I really appreciated how much Badlands stood out from the typical formula of predators hunting people. Now we've got creatures hunting a predator. Not too crazy a change, but it's enough to give it a unique voice in the franchise. Some might say it's Disney-fied, even though they put out Prey, which was very violent, and I sort of see what they say in this regard, having a sassy sidekick in the form of android Elle Fanning. Her character, as well as the story arc for Dec, did made me feel like it could have been a Star Wars plot. Just substitute the Yautja for a Trandoshan and the Weyland-Yutani android for a protocol droid and you're set. There are a few evil corporations in that universe that could fill in for Weyland, though they don't have much presence in the films. This thought process is why I thought Dan Trachtenberg would do great with a Star Wars movie, he says. Not that he should move up to a bigger franchise or whatever. I feel like his skills could translate well to a galaxy far, far away. All that said, he says I didn't have any expectations for Badlands and went on a whim because it looked like a fun action film. And I found myself loving the story of Dec as a runt predator trying to prove both himself while also avenging his brother. A predator learning positive masculinity by becoming a leader and protector rather than focusing on being the strongest isn't something I'd expect from a Predator movie, but I'm glad to see it. I thought the humor and chemistry between him and Thea were fitting and well done. It never felt out of place, like I assumed the fear was from fans going into this movie. It never felt less violent due to the rating. They just avoided the R due to no red blood being shown, since everyone in the movie is either an alien or an android. As a casual fan of these franchises, he says I appreciated the connections to the Alien movies through the use of Weyland-Yutani, and it perfectly fit the story and never felt like it was a connection for the sake of just having a crossover. The effects were pretty stellar, especially around Dec. I could never tell if he had CGI on him, and I always bought him as an alien Yautja doing all that action and movements. All in all, I really enjoyed this movie, and it has me wanting to check out the other Predator and Alien movies and shows I haven't watched yet. Rating 9 out of 10. Here's what I will say about all that, Anthony. Predator is not a horror franchise. It's a sci-fi franchise. And really, it's been a sci-fi franchise from the beginning. I know what people say about the first two movies. Whatever. Screw that. It's a science fiction movie. And to me, it became a science fiction movie from the moment you saw the other skulls in that Predator ship at the end of the second film, and one of them was an alien skull. Like, those franchises are together. They are one and the same in that regard. So to me, this just furthered out the backstory of the Ouija, and this just furthered out the backstory. And this really, to me, this film, more than any other film probably in the Alien Predator franchise, turns it into a sci-fi franchise. It's a science fiction franchise. Yes, it has horror elements. Yes, it has monster movie elements. But at the end of the day, it is a science fiction franchise, which is why the formulation of this story and the structure of it and how it went and the character dynamics work perfectly. And yeah, sure, you could do the same thing with Star Wars. He doesn't need to, though. He's totally good with where he's at in this particular franchise. But that's why I think it works, because Predators and Aliens are sci-fi at the end of the day, not horror. And people who want to latch onto the horror and act like it should be the only thing this franchise is, that's one note. And it's very lazy and silly in that regard, in my opinion. And very limiting as well. All right, next up, Mr. Scorsese. This 5-part documentary on Apple TV Plus, he says, expertly discusses the life and career of the acclaimed filmmaker Martin Scorsese, starting with his early life growing up in New York City, almost becoming a priest, to entering film school, all the way through his career, ups and downs, successes and controversies, up to his current day filled with endless producing, directing, and supporting projects, to the point where he said the only time he has to himself not working is during a root canal. This whole series was fascinating, especially having seen the majority of the movies discussed, as it brings to light the goings-on that informed who he was at the time of each release, as well as the people he knew growing up that he incorporated into movies like Mean Streets, or even someone he knew later who somehow got incorporated into a Tarantino movie. If you're a fan of Marty like I am, this will be a great watch. Rating 10 out of 10. Yep, that's on the list too. When the hell am I going to find time to watch all this shit? I don't know. Okay, The Running Man. No spoilers. Having never seen the original movie with Arnold, nor having read the book, he says, I thought this film was very enjoyable with very good and relevant political commentary that would probably get overlooked by MAGA because it stars a handsome white man, which is their whole bar for whether or not something is woke. Not as much action as I expected based on the trailers, but it was well paced and the action beats were very well timed. Wait a minute, they wouldn't like the fact that he has a black wife, would they? Oh no, you're right, they probably would overlook that because a lot of them have black wives. Oh, did I say that out loud? I digress. I enjoyed how the movie was a journey with different chapters where Ben Richards, he says, Glenn Powell, meets different characters who come and go from the story as needed, with each serving a specific purpose, including the woman towards the end, whom people think should have been in it earlier. In my opinion, he says it would be weird if she had shown up sooner, just like we didn't need to see the brothers again after he leaves Boston. They all serve their purpose in the story. Agreed. Completely agree with that. Again, I don't know the source material, he says, but I found the dystopian world in this movie to be eerily contemporary, and if this is what it was like in King's novel, then kudos to him for unfortunately predicting the late 2020s. Overall, not Edgar Wright's most stylish film in his filmography, but it is somehow both the most commercial, although it didn't make a lot, and also his most political. Worth a watch for those that missed it, rating 8.5 out of 10. Well, yeah, it doesn't need to be, in order for the symbolism to be commercial, in order for the movie to be commercial, it doesn't have to have made a ton of money. It just means that it was most commercial in terms of the subject matter and in terms of the story itself. Totally get that. Wicked for Good. No spoilers, yes, because I have not even seen the first one. He says, to start off, I had the most annoying group in my theater watching this movie in a very packed crowd, so that negatively affected the experience. That said, it's not as good as the first one, but anyone who knew the play knew to expect that. The second half of the story is less fun and sadder than the first, with funny lines and quirky side characters taking a very back seat to the point where any funny line stands out. With Wicked being an alternate take on The Wizard of Oz, he says, For Good is the half that collides with and passes the plot of the original film, but still focuses on its cast, with a certain farm girl story happening in the background. Some of this was well done, but other parts felt very shoehorned in to make it work, and really only works if you only watch the film as a kid and not right before or after this. That said, it makes sense to be like that if you look at Wicked as the true story of Elphaba and Wizard of Oz as the anti-Wicked Witch propaganda version. Much of the story, he says, is about the power of propaganda and how a liar can sway a crowd to turn against his enemies and anyone who might call him out. Not at all political, don't you think? Despite being shorter than part one, he says, it feels much longer, slower, and drawn out, with much less popular songs that don't particularly defy gravity. though there are a couple of big ones that are memorable and a few new ones that are easily forgettable. Worth watching if you loved the first one, but don't go out and watch the first one just to see this one. Rating 7 out of 10. I'll watch the first one at some point, and then if I like that, I'll move forward. If not, I'll leave it where it is. It is what it is. I'll probably be a completionist either way, but I'm in a different category with respect to that. All right, this next long paragraph. Kill Bill the Whole Bloody Affair. Okay. So I haven't seen, like, I own Kill Bill, like volumes 1 and 2, but I have not seen the Whole Bloody Affair, and I probably won't get to see it until Lionsgate does a Lionsgate limited release, which I almost certainly will, and I'll get that steelbook, or, you know, when it pops up on a streaming service of some kind. But spoilers for this one, which is fine, because I've heard of a few of the things that are not in, that were added into this, but it's nothing huge, at least not what I could detect. He says, I took the opportunity to finally watch this beloved two-part action epic for the first time in its intended format on the big screen, all put together with a 15-minute intermission. Give me the Snyder Cut in theaters like this. Having now seen the majority, but not all of Tarantino's films, I'd say Kill Bill is his most general audience / crowd-pleasing film. Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I enjoyed the chapter structure, he said, with some being flashbacks and non-chronological, and even one section being a full-on anime about the backstory of Lucy Liu's character. Yep, that's in the original. I knew nothing about Kill Bill besides Uma Thurman's iconic yellow jumpsuit and seeing Lucy Liu say, tear the bitch apart. Why does everybody censor some of these words that are completely okay to say on this show? I don't know, but it's all right. He says, so I was blown away being the action in both halves of the film, but especially, I think he meant seeing the action in both halves of the film, but especially the crazy 88 fight leading up to the showdown between Lucy and Uma. That might be the greatest action scene I've ever seen. It was that epic and well choreographed. As a non-fan of anime, I particularly enjoyed that segment because it took me so off guard and it fit into the old school film style Tarantino was going for with this whole project, with the blood sprays and the hyper-stylized action. Also, shots of feet. So many shots of feet. It's impossible to miss that now that it's been pointed out. No wonder Uma Thurman told her daughter to cover her feet when working with him. What a freak that Tarantino is. Also, what's up with him attacking Paul Dano and Matthew Lillard recently? How about worrying about yourself or bigger world issues than criticizing actors for no reason? He's always been an asshole. He's now an old, ornery asshole. That's how I take it, unfortunately. He says part 2 certainly had less action than part 1, but it was no less epic, with a greater explanation of who Bill is and Beatrix's backstory, which was very engaging and entertaining to watch. This all led up to the final confrontation with the big reveal that, spoiler, the bride's daughter actually lived and was raised by Bill. That's a very old spoiler. 20 years. Over 20 years now. That's right. That's how long ago the movie came out. He says seeing the bride drop her guard and immediately connect with her daughter, who she thought was dead, brought a totally new side to her character, but the confrontation following the daughter going to bed was very well done, even if Bill's characterization of Superman is kind of BS. And I like that she didn't just drop her vendetta due to this reveal, as she basically killed her, left her to rot in a coma while creeps raped her. Yes, that is true. He was a bastard and deserved to die. I've heard that this double feature includes some deleted scenes, he says, but I couldn't tell you what was added since I never saw it before. Also, at the end of the credits, there was an animated short based on a deleted scene. This scene also played in Fortnite, but I didn't realize it would actually be a Fortnite short featuring Kill Bill characters. I walked out during that when I saw the bride riding the battle bus. Besides that, I love the movie. Kill Bill is currently my new favorite Tarantino movie, and I understand how it became people's whole personality when it was most popular, rating 10 out of 10. Yep. I agree with you. It's probably his most mainstream, most accessible, most general audience film for sure. Definitely most action packed, and definitely like the revenge factor and all that was definitely like most like relatable in that regard. At least people understanding the bride situation and whatnot, and also the cast, like just everybody that was involved and the collection of characters. Like that was the height of Tarantino mania for sure back then, without question. Which definitely not what it used to be, especially with his own assholish behavior carrying the way these days. All right, next up, Wake Up Dead Man. No spoilers, thank you. After setting a high bar with Knives Out and Glass Onion, somehow Rian Johnson blew that bar away with Wake Up Dead Man. Oh, wow, really? Okay. All these movies have a message, he says, but this one goes a step further by incorporating religion into it, by showing both how it can be used to corrupt and also the good it can do when being used by a good man. Josh O'Connor blew me away as Father Judd and sets an ideal for a priest, as well as a stark contrast to Josh Brolin's Monsignor Wicks or even Glenn Close's Martha, who's been raised in that church since childhood. Daniel Craig continues his iconic role as Benoit Blanc, and for his part, shows how even a non-believer can be moved by faith while still playing up his detective wit throughout his investigation. The politics in this movie were blatantly shown, and I'm sorry if that's a negative to some, but this story would be nothing without it. The weaving of these political and religious themes, all while still making a compelling mystery, was expertly crafted. As much of a fan I am of The Last Jedi and the other two Knives Out movies, I think this is Rian Johnson's best work yet. Rating 10 out of 10. All right. Strong thoughts on Wake Up Dead Man. The Chair Company. No spoilers. What is this? A low-level conspiracy comedy starring Tim Robinson. This whole season felt like an extended bit from his sketch comedy, I Think You Should Leave, but it made for an enjoyable watch. Okay, I think I remember seeing clips from this. After his character has an embarrassing moment involving a broken chair, he says, he dives deep into finding the truth behind the company that made it, continuously following insane clues and often false leads and partnering up with someone else he doesn't know much about. As with his other show, his character and some others throughout the show behave like absolute freaks, while others are completely normal, such as the rest of his family, played by Lake Bell, Sophia Lillis, and Will Price. Characters like those act as the straight man to Robinson and others acting absurdly. Even his boss, played by Lou Diamond Phillips, is seemingly normal, but has some crazy scenes as well. By crazy, I generally in this case mean they tend to push things too far in social situations, such as by harping on small problems for far too long or by yelling dialogue in an otherwise normal conversation, he says. If you haven't seen I Think You Should Leave, I'd recommend watching a couple of sketches from that first episode to see if this show is for you. Some people love it. I thought it was pretty good, and I'll certainly watch the next season, rating 7 out of 10. I don't know if I really have any interest in seeing this. I can't say that I'm that big of a Tim Robinson person, to be honest with you. I don't have anything necessarily against him, but I can't say that I've really found his humor all that funny to me in the sketches of his that I've seen. So, yeah, I might just leave that one alone. But here's the last review that Anthony has with respect to this email. Zootopia 2, no spoilers. After a long wait, the sequel to Zootopia has finally been released, and like most Disney movies that are marketed well, it's a big hit. I saw the first movie when it was released, but not since, so I only vaguely remember it, and the quick recap in the intro here didn't really add much. I forgot. This time Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde are partners, not getting along too well, just like the classic buddy cop formula. Like the first movie, Zootopia 2 uses cute animals to mask real-life themes and messages such as discrimination and the whitewashing of history. Those themes were well done here, and overall I found the movie a good time, though it doesn't enter any top Disney movie list for me. Even when its emotional stakes are high, it doesn't reach the heights of some classic Disney movies, not the average Pixar movie. They always know how to make you cry. Rating 7 out of 10. All right, so that's it for Anthony's reviews. Now he says, finally, for a couple of other topics. There's a few paragraphs here. He says, Halo campaign evolved and that other Halo thing that happened. After 4 long years since Halo Infinite released and failed to blow the community away after a lackluster launch, it has reached a great point and is filled with great content, even though much of it is paid cosmetics and still lacking things they promised, namely campaign split screen. Last year, 343 Industries, named for the character first introduced in Halo Combat Evolved, 343 Guilty Spark, rebranded Halo Studios and teased something similar to the original game, showing off their new engine. Everyone guessed that they were working on a Halo CE remake, and lo and behold, a year later, they announced Halo Campaign Evolved, a full remake of the original campaign that started it all, complete with 2-player split screen and 4-player online co-op, as God intended. All right. As a lifelong Halo fan, I was not initially hyped for this, and even expressed that much in comments about the announcement, and I was surprised that I was dogpiled by others. For me, this announcement was fully expected since last year, and so I was hoping they would pair it with an announcement of Halo 7, or at least some other game far down the line that utilizes the Unreal Engine but tells a totally new story. I found the retread of a classic to be a boring idea and felt lazy, especially since Halo CE already had a remaster in Halo CE Anniversary, and even that included some multiplayer maps for Halo Reach, and this one has no multiplayer component, hence the Campaign Evolved title. All that said, he says after seeing others' perspectives, I'm more interested in this, knowing it will be a great introduction for new fans, being a full remake with modern updates to gameplay, unlike the Anniversary version, which just updated the graphics to Halo Reach style. There are also at least 3 brand new missions being added, which is an exciting idea for a Halo lore fan who wants something new like me. I've also not yet mentioned, the biggest piece of news with this game. It will be the first ever Halo game on PlayStation. This is a big deal as Halo is Xbox's flagship franchise and effectively to me is the final nail in the coffin of Xbox having exclusives and honestly any reason to buy an Xbox. Along with this announcement is the final update for Halo Infinite, so whenever I finish the new Battle Pass, I'll have no reason to keep paying for Xbox Live every year. I've ranted before in these email missives about the missteps 343 and now Halo Studios have had, but I'll keep giving them more chances with hopes that this is the start of a new era for the franchise, even if the next 3 games are just remakes of the Bungie trilogy. Halo needs a recovery to its previous heights. Well, I will say this. Even though I have like a 12-year backlog of video games, I have no reason to get rid of my Series X. It's the current gen console that I have, and until somebody gives me a logistical reason why I need a PS5, I'm just going to stick with that, truthfully. So if that's an argument that you and others want to tackle as far as why I should even remotely think about getting a PS5 in the not too distant future, that is your business. But until then, I'm going to stick with Xbox because Xbox is what I have and what I can afford at the moment, if you will. He says, now for a political segment. Oh, this will be interesting. With the announcement of Halo on PlayStation was the viral idea that the console war was over, with Xbox admitting defeat. This led some incel in the White House to claim victory for Trump, who can now add the end of this fake war to his list of fake wars he's claiming he's ended. Seeing official government accounts post AI pictures of Trump in Spartan armor saluting or shaking hands with Master Chief was incredibly gross to see as a longtime fan of this franchise, but what was even worse was seeing GameStop join in and post their own AI pics with the same theme. Now, I was already annoyed with GameStop, he says, ever since some employee at my local store stole my and other Power Up Pros member points, and when I called customer service, they refused to give me the points back. Since then, I canceled my membership and bought only a handful of games from there since then. With this event, though, I don't think I'll ever walk in their store physically or online again. F GameStop. You didn't censor that one out. I can understand why Microsoft and Halo Studios stayed out of it because it's better for them to be silent rather than to piss off the big baby in the Oval Office, who I doubt even knows what Halo is, but he sure as shit knows Microsoft. But GameStop joining in makes them complicit. I'm entirely done with that company. Well, I didn't need Trump and all that, the White House stuff. I didn't need that to have strong feelings negatively about GameStop. But again, I worked for them for 7 years. I know how much of a shit show that company's been for a long time. But here we go. Another WB merger. Even though I appreciated Brooklyn Batman keeping me in the loop, he says, I really didn't care about the news of another Warner Brothers merger after having at least 2 others happen in the last decade. Now that Netflix is the frontrunner and likely new owner, I see that there was no positive end to another merger happening, and we might be entering the worst case scenario. Paramount would have been bad owners and would make drastic changes to their news and content, like from CNN or even something like Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Bill Maher probably wouldn't change much. But at least they're a film studio, he says, that would still prioritize theaters and make physical media. Netflix couldn't care less about theaters and is anti-physical media, with only a select few of their shows or movies getting physical releases. This merger will doom theaters with even fewer studios making theatrical films, and that is very sad. As someone still hopeful to enter the film industry, it seems more and more like the industry is taking a totally different direction, if not doomed as well. Plus, Netflix doesn't want things like CNN, so the news and sports might still be sold to Paramount anyway. My thoughts on this topic summarized, this sucks. Yep, totally understand. Totally get that. And so ends another lengthy email missive put together over months, he says. This will likely be my last email of the year, though I will be seeing Avatar 3 soon. Let me give a prediction of my review that I'll still probably include in my next email. Avatar Fire and Ash is a visually spectacular masterpiece with a good enough story and characters, but with mind-blowing visual effects and a solid score. Till next time, may the Force be with you, Anthony Dorsey. And that concludes what will likely be the final email missive of 2025 for Mr. Anthony Dorsey. Was it longer than John's several emails earlier? I don't know. As of right now, looking at the waveforms, it looks to be equal length. But fortunately, Amr didn't send an email this week either. Otherwise, this would be a 5-hour-long episode easy. And I'm already running late on my time to finish this particular episode. So I will just say thank you, Anthony, for the email missive and look forward to more next year. With respect to your thoughts on movies, TV, and other assorted media. All right, next up, Alex De Silva's email this week titled FLITE CHAT 29. This email is brought to you by the new crispy tenders at CarMax. Did he make that up, or is that something that's actually said somewhere? I don't know, but let's dive into it. He says, hey, Ray, some sports talk and then on to the geeky stuff. So apparently it's all geeky stuff, let's be honest. The sports talk is definitely geeky, but I get what you're saying. He says, so apparently it's looking like the World Cup is going to hold 3-minute hydration breaks in each half. Originally, this was done in really hot venues so that players had a chance to drink water and ensure they didn't overheat on the field, but it's not even necessary to do that in all the World Cup venues this summer, especially the stadiums in Canada. It's looking like this is just an excuse, rather, to insert more commercials into World Cup games. Obviously, soccer games are 90 minutes long and are played over two 45-minute halves with a 15-minute intermission, but this feels like an excuse to divide the game into four quarters to stuff more commercials in. Wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Commercialism is definitely a thing, especially in sports these days. He says, we talked a bit about national broadcasters last flight chat. One who I find amusing is Kevin Harlan, who does NBA national broadcasts. I think he also doesn't he also do football? I think he also does football. I could be wrong. I could be mistaking him for somebody else. But he says he's notorious for misreading advertisements mid-game. The funniest one I've ever heard from him was last season during a Celtics game. Here's a transcript of how that reading went. Okay, now I think I get the title. It says the NBA rather on TNT is brought to you by the new crispy tenders at CarMax. What? The way car buying should be? Can that be? What is that? Wait a minute. Hold on. Are they serving tenders with cars? Are there tenders in the car? We just had the marriage of two different sponsors and it was ugly. Who wrote that? I couldn't find a YouTube link to it, he says, but here's a Facebook link if you want to hear how baffled he sounded while reading that. It was so funny watching that live. Never in a million years could I have been prepared for such an absurd ad reading in the middle of the game. Yeah, that is very absurd. Agreed. Intriguing. Hilarious, of course. Kevin Harlan, I don't watch a ton of NBA, like stuff here and there, but yeah, I think he's one of the better voices. I'd say that. He's one of the better play-by-play guys. He says, looks like there's been more developments regarding the Netflix WB purchase. I'm not going to lie, the idea of shorter theatrical windows sounds appealing for me personally, but I understand there are bigger business consequences involved if that were to happen. Yes, bigger business and industry consequences for sure. Then he asks, how has the Stranger Things marathon been going? To be determined, to be continued. And quite honestly, I don't think I'm going to provide any updates on it at all until I finished it. So, quite frankly, you'll know whether I have finished it or not by the time we get to Christmas, because Christmas is when the next episodes are out, right? So, we'll see. He says, speaking of Stranger Things, apparently the finale is going to air in theaters in addition to on Netflix. I certainly won't be attending a theater showing when I can watch the episode in the comfort of home, but I do think it's a cool option for those that want that communal experience. Oh yeah, intriguing. I know that John or somebody else is probably looking like, well, see, Netflix does what it. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. Not at all. And again, what theaters are they going to show that in? All theaters? No. There's going to be plenty of chain theaters that will not show that. So no, I would not use that at all, everyone, as any type of example that Netflix is going to embrace theatrical. Certainly not. It's just an event for publicity's sake. On a recent vodka stream, Alex says that Chris Belga said that Netflix has been telling scriptwriters to write scripts with more exposition, explicitly stating what's happening on screen, since today's audiences watch Netflix while on their phones. If this is true, wow, that is actually disgusting and makes me fear for the future of Netflix originals. Did he say that on one that I was on recently? I feel like I heard him say that. I feel like, because we did talk about this. We definitely talked about this. I was on Vodka Stream a week or so ago. He might have said this on one of the ones I was on. Maybe. I know I've heard him talk about that before. And yeah, that is awful, isn't it? It is terrible, right? The idea that just so that everybody's clear, Netflix has been allegedly, they've been telling screenwriters to write scripts with more exposition, explicitly stating what's happening on screen, since today's audiences watch Netflix while on their phones. Yeah, that is awful. That is terrible. That is really just a horrible perversion of the art form, subjectively speaking. And yes, it should make you fear for the future of Netflix originals. I completely agree with that, Alex. He asks, do you think that streaming movies should be eligible for Oscars? Is the theatrical release requirement just arbitrary, or does it actually hold some type of importance regarding the quality of a movie? I think that's a subjective question. From my perspective, no. I don't think that it should be, like, I do think it's arbitrary. But I think that there are plenty of filmmakers that don't consider it arbitrary because their process involves making a film that is going to be shown on big screens. Now, to me, I'm all about rewatchability. I'm all about being able to watch it later, so I think that you should take both into account. Like, I don't think you should just make a movie that's only for theaters and not for home. I think that's elitist bullshit. But, by the same token, I don't think you should, like, ignore theatrical at all completely. So it's weird. For me, I feel like there are stories that can be made for all screens, and I feel like your perspective as a storyteller should be to accommodate multiple screens, as difficult as that challenge could be in that regard, right? But I I think it's arbitrary, but I know other people that don't think it's arbitrary in that regard, to be honest with you. And it, again, as with anything, it's all subjective with respect to, what you regard to be, part of the quality of a movie or not, with respect to theatrical and with respect to home viewing. He says, I recently rewatched the Siege of Mandalore arc on the Clone Wars. There are so many things that stand out about this arc. The moment where Order 66 is about to happen is just so good. The mood and atmosphere during that moment with the haunting music, even if you've never seen Revenge of the Sith, you would just know that something heavy was about to go down due to the unsettling feeling the sequence gives you. Every time I rewatch this arc, I always watch all 4 episodes back to back like it's a movie. After these episodes were released, they should have just released this one as a movie. Apparently, there's a fan-made supercut out there that intercuts between Revenge of the Sith and Siege of Mandalore. That sounds cool in concept, but I don't think I'll ever actually watch that, as it would require setting aside about 4 hours to watch. That's Zack Snyder's Justice League length. I'd do that. I would absolutely watch that. It doesn't surprise me that that fan cut exists, because the first thing I thought of after watching Siege of Mandalore was, wow, it'd be awesome if Dave Filoni redid Revenge of the Sith animated wise and did incorporate it into that version, like doing it that way, like that would be cool. But also integrating the live action with the animation would also be cool. It would also add, another bridge between the two to show that yes, this is all the same universe, which I am definitely in favor of that. So that would be cool. So that fan edit, maybe one of these days I'll go seek that out whenever the hell I might have time to watch that. Who the hell knows? He says, last time when I said I only want to see Earth during the present in Star Trek, I meant their present, not our present. Some examples would be when we saw Starfleet HQ in San Francisco in one of the movies, and when Picard went back to France early in season 4. Okay, so not the historical fiction episodes. You just don't, you're not interested in seeing Earth like in the 23rd century or the 24th century. Okay. I will tell you that that doesn't happen very often, but there are some cases where you will see it again. I don't know how much there is left in the rest of TNG that you're going to see, but there definitely is in future episodes like DS9, for sure. And not a whole lot really in the others. Okay, it doesn't happen very often, but they do keep it in space, and they keep it on other planets a great deal. You don't see Earth really all that much going for the rest of the show. I will say that. For the rest of the franchise, really, I will say that. He says, this week for The Next Generation, I watched The Host. The moving stomach looked so creepy, but it was a great practical effect. Ah, yes, the introduction to the Trill. He says, maybe I missed something, but what are the ethics of the parasite taking over a host body? Do the host give permission to be overtaken? If so, why would they want this? It's part of their society. It's how they operate. It's a chosen thing. Google the Trill on Memory Alpha, and that will give you a full explanation. But fair warning, it may give you spoilers to Star Trek Deep Space Nine if you have any thoughts about watching that show later, because the Trill are much more heavily focused and featured on in that show, since one of the main characters, Dax, is a Trill. So really at this point in this season of TNG, the Trill are not really all that fleshed out. They're far more fleshed out later. The same would be the case with the Cardassians, which I forget if you've met them or not in this season. If you haven't yet, which I think you have, but in the event that you haven't, you will. And they get fleshed out way more in DS9 as well. Just throwing that out there too. He says it must be so weird to realize that you were actually in love with a small, gross bug-like creature the whole time. Well, not in the 24th century. I mean, maybe for people who don't know what Trill are, but again, this gets heavily covered and focused on, like in great detail in Deep Space Nine, as far as like the Trill itself. But it is a symbiotic relationship, I will tell you that. I mean, yes, you can look at it as a parasite, but as far as ethics are concerned, the society not only embraces it, it is considered a chosen path for like a select few that are eligible to be able to do it. Like it's not something that everyone on the planet can do, but those who can do it have an elevated status, if you will. That's the best way that I could put it without going into heavy spoilers. But like I said, go to Memory Alpha and look up Trill, but be wary of spoilers if you are interested in watching Deep Space Nine, where all of this is fleshed out way further than just this episode of TNG. He says next episode is called The Mind's Eye, Live Long and Prosper. Alex, ooh, The Mind's Eye. That's an intriguing episode. Very interested to see some of your thoughts on that particular episode going forward and the implications of certain things that happen and certain people that are in that episode. But either way, thank you as always for the feedback, Alex. Greatly appreciated. Looking forward to your future thoughts on the Mind's Eye and everything else going on. And finally, we'll close out this episode of Flight Chat with an email from Jared Cardos titled Supergirl Trailer, The Game Awards, and More Netflix Talk. He says, Hey Ray, hope you're doing well and not freezing during this Arctic blast. I would agree with you that the weather we've been getting here is dog shit, but sadly I think dog shit would be warmer. You're probably right. Yes, it's been Arctic cold. It was in single digits earlier. It is 12 degrees now. But yeah, it's been pretty effing cold. He says, totally understand needing to change the schedule around to the weekends, though I wonder if it would work better to have Flight Chat on Saturdays and the cast on Sundays. That way it gives us the week to write in about the past episode and whatever else is going on. Just a suggestion. It'll be cool either way. You know, I'd thought about that, Jared. I actually had thought about that. That might not be a bad idea. That might actually not be a bad idea. It's something to think about for sure. Like you said, it gives us the week to write in about the past episode and whatever else. Yeah, that's not a bad idea at all. I was thinking along the lines of Saturday being like end of the week, right? So whatever happened during the week would be recapped there, but you know, Sunday would work for that as well. Truthfully, as far as news going into the week, to start a new week and then, resetting topics. Yes, I could see that. I will definitely give that some thought. That's not a bad idea because that just popped into my head like yesterday, like thinking, what if I flip flopped them? But we'll see. Either way, weekend for sure. He says, now let's get the big and exciting new thing out of the way. The Supergirl trailer, which I really liked, he says. It feels similar to the first Superman trailer in that it gives you just enough to have an idea of what's going on, but still leaves a lot to the imagination. I have a bit more of an idea of what's going on, he says, because I've read the book it's based on, and while there are definite differences in some of Kara's characterization and the villain Krem's look being a lot more monstrous, it looks like the relationship with Kara and Ruthie is still intact, which is probably the most important part of the story. It also looks like we're going to see Kara's origin from that story, and if it's anything like in the book, expect a lump in the throat at least, he says. And I knew we would get a tease of Lobo, but that was a tease. Not even a full shot or line of dialogue, but hey, something to keep fans waiting for the next trailer. Yes. No, they knew what they were doing with that. I completely agree. Overall, solid trailer, he says, and I'm glad to see it's getting a good reception outside of the usual suspects. I do find it funny that people are acting like James Gunn is making this into Guardians Light, even though the trailer clearly states at the end that the writer and director are different. And it's not like Gunn is the creator of grungier lived-in sci-fi worlds. I would have sooner compared this to Star Wars or maybe Firefly, but I'm sure it'll become more apparent for people as we get closer to release. I totally get what you're saying there, Jared. I think Guardians, for the usual suspects, is an easier point of comparison, not only because of James Gunn, but because of comic book movies as a genre. You're more likely, you would think, to compare comic book movies to other comic book movies as opposed to other franchises like Star Wars or Firefly. But I totally get what you're saying as far as comparing it to those franchises before even thinking of Guardians, right? I totally understand that. He says, but Supergirl wasn't the only big trailer to come out that Thursday by a long shot. We also just had the Game Awards, one of the biggest occasions of the year filled with a lot of trailers for the next big games, announcements, and world premieres. Oh, and some awards as well. Awards-wise, Claire Obscure Expedition 33 swept it with a record-breaking 9 wins, including Best RPG, Best Music, Best Performance from actress Jennifer English, and Game of the Year itself, and all are well-deserved, he says. I think I talked about it a little bit shortly when it came out, but after finishing it, I have to say it's honestly one of the best games I've ever played. The gameplay is super engaging, the story and performances are incredible, and the music is absolutely sublime, he says. I'm pretty sure it's still available on Game Pass, so if when you decide to start gaming again, that's something that I think is very much worth giving a shot at the very least. Yeah, one of my coworkers was talking about it the other day. She calls it Expedition 33 because she says something about the Claire Obscure makes her want to say something, a different phrase, and so she just keeps it out of her head and only thinks of it as Expedition 33. But I was like, that's the same game, right? Yeah, it's the same game. So yeah, she was singing the praises of that game the other day at work, and yeah, it is definitely one that is on the radar for sure. So yeah, whenever it's on the list, add it to the really, really long list of media that I don't know that I'll ever get time to consume, but we'll see. As for the other games announced, he says there was some other great stuff that was revealed. It turns out that the next few years are going to be big for Tomb Raider, surprisingly. It's had a bit of a resurgence lately between remasters of the first 6 games and the Netflix animated series, but at TGA, Amazon Games, which apparently now owns the Tomb Raider franchise, announced 2 new games. The first is Legacy of Atlantis, which will be a big expanded remake of the very first Tomb Raider game coming out in 2026, and then a brand new game called Catalyst coming out in 2027. It's funny, he says, I wasn't too into the old Tomb Raider games when I was growing up, but I never really got into any of their games until the recent Survivor trilogy. But I'm pretty excited for these. I don't know if it's ever been mentioned here before, but did you ever get into these games? No, I didn't. I watched the first Tomb Raider movie with Angelina Jolie, did not watch the sequel, and then I watched the Alicia Vikander version, which I really liked. I really liked that movie and wanted it to do better and wanted it to continue on. But no, unfortunately, I did not get into the games themselves at any level, whether it was the older PS1 games or the PS2 versions or even the newer ones that were kind of remodeled in, to me, kind of took up the same idea, remodeling it like the Alicia Vikander movie. So yeah, I'm aware of it. They seem cool, but no, I have never like jumped into it myself. I don't know. One of these days I may dip my toe into that, but again, too much shit to watch, read, and play these days. He says outside of that, there were 2 big BioWare Mass Effect games from former devs, Mass Effect light games, pardon me, from former devs that look exciting. First was Exodus, a game that I had heard about a bit in the past but is now getting a bigger push and has a semi-solid release date of early 2027. It has a lot of Mass Effect energy, where you play as a salvager named Jun Eslan, who gains abilities that allows him to take on a species controlling the galaxy called Celestials, upgraded humans from 40,000 years in the future, or something like that. For a game that hasn't come out, there's already a surprising amount of lore, including an episode in Amazon's video game anthology short series Secret Level. The episode stars Matthew McConaughey, whose character will also play a role in the game, as well as a book, which I'm definitely going to try to read through before the game comes out. That sounds intriguing. He says there was also a surprise announcement of Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic, which is a spiritual successor to the BioWare's Knights of the Old Republic games, and is set to be an action RPG set during that timeline. It sounds like production has just started on it, so it's going to be at least a few years before it comes out, and considering that the previously announced Knights of the Old Republic remake has had developmental struggles, there are people unconvinced that this will actually happen, but I'm optimistic enough to keep it on my radar. I didn't play KOTOR back in the day, so yep, add this one to the list as well. He says, I think the last thing I'll talk about from the Game Awards is oddly another trailer for a movie, specifically a new Street Fighter movie, which seems to be keeping the spirit of the games, especially in terms of the costumes and the fight choreography. It looks very over the top and ridiculous, which is probably the best way to approach it. Yes, I completely agree. Because I haven't like sat down and watched the trailer, but I've seen like the visuals, I've seen the clips from it, and yeah, I wasn't like big into Street Fighter, I wasn't big into fighting games, but from what I know of Street Fighter, that trailer looks like the game. Like, what's wrong with looking like the game? Like, his hair's supposed to look like that. The outfit's supposed to look like that. It's supposed to be over the top and ridiculous. The game was over the top and ridiculous. Why wouldn't the movie also be over the top and ridiculous? So, yeah, intriguing. That's as much as I'll say at the moment. Intriguing. I don't know that I have to see it, but I am curious about it. I'll put it that way. He said, of course, there's a lot of other stuff that was shown off there, but this was the stuff that immediately came to me that are exciting. Cool. Thank you. Appreciate sharing that. He says, now with all that out of my system, here's some thoughts from your last couple of episodes. He says, first off, I see what you did there with the name of your Flightcast episode on the whole Netflix Warner Brothers debacle, and well done. Reminds me that I still need to see that movie. I was really hoping that somebody caught what I did with the title. For those who don't know what I did, the title of the last episode, before the Supergirl first teaser trailer episode that I popped up, the title of episode 227 is called The Acquisition of Warner Brothers by the Streamer Netflix. And it is definitely a play on the title, The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, a movie starring Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck that I have not seen, but I did think of that title. So I'm glad that at least Jared figured out what that was. Thank you, Jared. I appreciate that. As long as one person got what I was saying, it's all worth it. He says, overall, that was a good episode that I think did a lot to summarize and express all the potential problems with this merger. One thing that was mentioned is that with Netflix buying Warner Brothers, it might make it easier for Paramount to buy the spun-off Discovery Media and take control of CNN. And honestly, I wonder if spinning it off will make it less likely for them to do that. Remember when Disney was buying Fox? The FCC decided that since Disney already had a news station, they couldn't also own Fox News. So all that stuff was spun off into its own company. I could see the same thing happening here, where even if Paramount bought Discovery, that would likely mean that CNN would be spun off into its own thing, which now that I think about it, might make it harder for CNN to survive on its own. And of course, we live in a perpetual unprecedented moment, so it could just happen either way. But I don't think it's quite as much of an easy get for Paramount as one might think. I think where that comes from, Jared, the thought process, is that the resistance, because you're right, there was resistance. Like Fox or Disney was told, no, you already have ABC. You cannot also own Fox News. You cannot also own the regional Fox News stations and the 22 regional Fox networks, the regional Fox Sports networks. You cannot own all of them. So yes, that had to be sold off. But to be honest with you, even though that happened during the first term of the current president, I don't see that happening during this term of the current president, because I feel like deregulation is just the name of the game and they don't care. I really don't think they care, truthfully. Which is also why I feel like all these arguments against the regulatory scrutiny for Netflix, I don't know how many of those are going to be observed either, truthfully. I feel like antitrust is not even a thing these days with respect to Congress or anything, with the government. I feel like they're okay with consolidation. They're okay with monopolies. They're perfectly fine with all of it. And they're just letting everything go. And I realize that might be, an extreme assumption to just assimilate. But yeah, it would not surprise me if that's the case. I don't think there's going to be any regulatory scrutiny with them buying CNN either as a package, because that's the thing. They're not being told. Paramount isn't being told you have to split up. Like, it's not like, okay, if the shareholders decide that they're going to go with the Paramount bid instead of Netflix, do I have any faith that the DOJ or somebody is going to tell them, well, you can't also own CNN? No, because nobody said that to this point. Not only has nobody said that to this point, I think David Ellison has flat out said that CNN is going to get an overhaul if and when they buy them, right? Like, no one's stopping him. No one is telling him he can't do that. So I don't see that being the same scenario where, like, with what Disney, the position that Disney was put into when they bought Fox. I don't see the same thing being carried through here. I just think it's a different climate, a much more deregulated, antitrust is not a thing climate nowadays. And that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. He says, and all those quotes from Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos does give one pause about the future of theatrical releases with this merger, though it does look like he's walking some of those quotes back. Apparently on Monday, he was on an investor call and he said, quote, we're deeply committed to releasing those movies exactly the way they would release those movies today, and that we, quote, talked a lot about in the past about wanting to do it because we've never been in that business. When this deal closes, we are in that business and we are going to do it, end quote. Of course, talk is cheap. We'll have to see exactly how much he'll stick to that, but the fact that he's saying that so early in the process is interesting. Well, I also wonder, because you're right, talk is cheap, but by the same token, I also wonder if, strategically, in realizing how much of a shock to the system this is, and also realizing that he needs regulatory approval and that the unions are not going to be on his side, how much is he saying to, like, appease them so that maybe he'll get a benefit of the doubt from the regulatory process and from the unions before he lowers the boom after the deal is done, truthfully, right? Like, you can say whatever you want to keep everybody believing that you're going to prioritize theatrical media and you're not going to change anything about the schedule, and then as soon as the deal is done and all the regulatory hoops have been jumped, you lower that boom and do what we're all fearful they're going to do in that regard, right? Like, I wonder how much of it is for show now, and then he's going to, absolutely tell us something. He's going to tell us something now and show us something different later in that regard. Like, I do wonder about that. That duplicity is certainly a very strong possibility. He says also, you mentioned how this could be a problem for the Batman Part 2, and what's interesting about that, potentially, is as there have been a lot of rumors that Scarlett Johansson will be in the movie, and there was rumors that she was going to take a paycheck cut in exchange for a piece of the global box office. If that turns out to be true, then I have to imagine that she's looking at this news, being reminded of what happened with Black Widow, and thinking, damn it, not again, while calling her agent and lawyers. And I have to imagine she's not going to be the only one. Sure, she's not going to be the only one, but let's see what her leverage is. Let's see, like I was telling John earlier, I don't know what the leverage is with Netflix here. The leverage over the studios, because of the theatrical component and their responsibility, if you will, their obligation to the exhibitors is very different than the position that Netflix is in right now. Like, I don't know. And, some people, I think John even said that there was some speculation that, the IMAX chief was saying, well, they have agreements with us till 2029 and they're going to be held to that. Okay. What about after 2029? Right? Like, we could literally, like, let's say there's a situation where, okay, Man of Tomorrow isn't affected and the Batman Part 2 isn't affected. Okay, so now we have what, a couple years? I mean, at some point, theaters are still going to die under Netflix's watch, right? They're still going to kill them. But like, are we going to move the goalposts and be like, well, they're not going to kill them? And they're like, well, they're only going to kill them in 4 years, right? And then you're going to be hoping and praying that in those 4 years, they change their minds, even though they really don't need to in that regard, as far as theatrical presentation is concerned. And when I say kill theaters, it's really killing wide releases, because I've said before that theaters will evolve into being a niche market, and this would be the harshest way to do it, to basically have the number one streamer take control of the majority of the library and basically phase the more theaters out so that it becomes niche by numbers as opposed to by audience demand. Although they claim, Sarandos is claiming, in those other quotes I read from earlier this year, Sarandos is claiming that is the audience's demand, that they want to watch movies at home because they can't afford to go to theaters. So, it's a very slippery slope that we're on, and we'll see exactly how much more slippery it gets going forward, Jared. That's for sure. But yeah, wouldn't surprise me if this is what Netflix is going to do. Wouldn't surprise me at all if ScarJo is readying the lawyers and saying basically deja vu, with what Chapek did with Black Widow back in 2020. Yeah, I could see that for sure. 2021, really. He says, finally, a couple of things from the recent flight chat. First, when Alex was talking about Edge of Tomorrow, it reminded me that there's actually an anime movie coming out next month that adapts the original Japanese novel that looks really cool. Also, in regards of losing track of where a movie is on whatever streamer, what I use is a website called Just Watch that searches for that kind of thing, and I find it works most of the time. Just Watch. Okay, he provided a link here, because I don't think here we go. Just Watch, your streaming guide for movies, TV shows, and sports. Discover movies and TV shows. Okay. So Discover Daily. So there's like a daily streaming chart. Today's streaming chart's going viral. Oh, The Town is viral on Netflix. That's interesting. The Town season 1. Wait a minute. Is The Town a TV series now? What is this? I have not heard about this. The Town TV series. Like, is this like The Town? Like from the Ben Affleck movie? Like, clearly he's not in it, but is this a similar premise? That's crazy. All right. So I'll bookmark this because I'm curious about looking at this myself and seeing what is on each of these apps. All right. Just Watch. Thank you. Appreciate that link. Good suggestion. He says, as for the pronunciation of Ras Al Ghul, I actually found a video from TikTok of all places that seems to give the most succinct answer from a native Arabic speaker. It sounds more like Ross than Raish, and the Raish comes from using the Hebrew alphabet, but even he describes the name as a choose-your-own adventure and that it works either way, but I totally get why people would prefer to use the correct pronunciation. Okay, yeah, I'll have to watch, because it looks like he provided the link to the TikTok video as well. Hey, listen, TikTok does actually have some valid information. There are actually some valid informational sources on TikTok. TikTok is not all junk, and it's not all bullshit, and it's not all propaganda. Like, there is some valid stuff on TikTok, as there is on social media. There's valid stuff on social media, even with it being the cesspool that it is in several different places. But yeah, you just got to sort through it. He says, but I think that'll be enough for me this week. Thanks as always for reading and looking forward to your future episodes. Thank you as always, Jared, for the feedback. Oh yeah, I'm seeing all the clips. You did leave clips and trailers. This is perfect because I was totally going to look for a trailer for Exodus. And you might have even said earlier that you did include trailer links. Thank you. Appreciate that because I do want to see that. I am curious about that. And also to watch that Street Fighter movie trailer as well. So thank you as always for the feedback, Jared. And I will definitely take that into consideration with respect to the whole scheduling thing for the shows for this weekend, flip-flopping them between Saturday and Sunday, because that might not be a bad idea. That really might not be a bad idea at all. Thank you. Appreciate that. And that'll do it for this week's episode of Flight Chat. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to everyone that sent in feedback. Thank you to John Rossler. Thank you to Anthony Dorsey. Thank you to Alex De Silva and Jared Cardos for all of your feedback and all of your insight and whatnot. It is always greatly appreciated. If any of you want to join the feedback circle and have your stuff read on Flight Chat, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the FlightCast, on BlueSky at FlightCast. You can comment on the posting for this particular episode at the FlightCast YouTube channel. There's also a FlightCast Facebook page, and of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.